Chapter 1357 Why Aren't You My Brother-in-Law? The wind whistled deafening by Zhong Xian's ears. Even though it only appeared to be 2 or 3 meters, it felt as if he was falling from a height of several thousand meters. Not only was his speed swiftly accelerating, the pressure of the surrounding space on him was rapidly intensifying. The moment that he dived into the sesame-sized spatial distortion, his surroundings suddenly blurred. When he came to once more, he was already standing in the midst of a lush green field. White clouds drifted in the beautiful blue sky, and vibrant verdant grass covered the earth. It almost felt like a utopia. Taking a deep breath, the air was rich with spiritual energy, as if one was standing right above a spirit vein. It made one's cells dance in exhilaration. It's indeed impossible for those of Saint 8 Dan and above to enter this area, Zhong Xian noted. The entrance of the distorted space was only strong enough to carry cultivators of their strength over. If those of the dimension-sundering realm attempted to enter, the distorted space would collapse. Looking forward, Zhong Xian saw Yuan Xiao and the others standing nearby. Confusion could be seen reflected in their eyes. They were shocked by the sight before them as well. There were plenty of elders in the Sanctum of Sages who wielded a deep understanding of spatial laws too, but they were only capable of creating folded spaces. It was unimaginable that anyone would be able to create a space that bore such a deep resemblance to reality and harnessed such concentrated spiritual energy. The elder who left behind this ancient domain has placed the spirit vein in the valley into this folded space as well. Otherwise, how could he possibly breed an artifact on the level of the Dongshu Gourd, said someone from behind. Luo Xianqing had entered the area as well. Placed the spirit vein into this folded space? Yuan Xiao and the others were astonished. Even Zhong Xian felt that this matter was inconceivable. He had seen plenty of folded spaces, and he even had one with him at the moment. Under normal circumstances, folded spaces were separate entities from reality, so to put an entire spirit vein in and even have it continue producing spiritual energy, it was unimaginable what it would take to accomplish that. Brother Luo, do you know who the expert that left behind this ancient domain is? Zhong Xian asked. A person who could leave behind such a formidable ancient domain was bound to be a famous figure even among the countless experts who had risen in the entire history of the master-teacher continent. Luo Xianqing paused for a moment before saying, I'm not too sure whom the ancient domain was left behind by, but this place seems to have some links to ancient sage Qiu Wu. Ancient sage Qiu Wu? Zhong Xian was stunned. Indeed. In the past several dozen millenniums, other than Kong Shi and the old ancestor of our Luo clan, only ancient sage Qiu Wu has managed to comprehend the highest realm of space. This folded space is so exquisitely created that it could even sustain the growth of a treasure like the Dongshu Gourd. I really can't think of anyone who could achieve such a feat other than him, Luo Xianqing explained. Zhong Xian also nodded in realization. It was no wonder he was able to gauge the distortion space in terms of the levels of the heavenly art of dimension unravel prior to entering. In the end, it turned out that it was highly likely that this folded space had been left behind by that expert. Previously, he had quite a delightful chat with the ancient sage Qiu Wu's fragmented soul, but it was a pity that the latter could not stay for too long. If he could meet the latter here in this folded space, it would definitely be a good opportunity to exchange some insights regarding space. The Dongshu Gourd is right ahead, but there's a formation blocking the way. The previous time I came here, I studied the formation for quite a few days, but I was still unable to find a way to resolve it, Luo Xianqing said as he pointed forward. Looking in the direction that Luo Xianqing was pointing, they saw a river flowing in the midst of the sky. There was a long, thin vine wrapped around the river at a certain point, and connected at the other end of the vine was a lush green gourd. The gourd was not too big, and there were no physical traits to suggest that there was something exceptional to it. But for some reason, there was a bizarre distortion in the space around it that gave a feeling that the gourd existed in another dimension. It was a sensation that made one feel as if one would be unable to touch the gourd even if it was right before one. Upon seeing the gourd, everyone's eyes lit up. They were still wary of the dangers they would have to go through before reaching the gourd, but to think that it would actually be so close to them. Let me take a look. Out of curiosity, Yuan Xiao took a step forward, intending to fly forth to harvest the gourd. However, The next moment, cold sweat rained down his body, and he hurriedly retreated in fear. Despite his swift reaction, he was still a step too late. A huge force that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere abruptly struck his chest. Pang! Before he could even grasp what was going on, he was sent flying. He skidded several dozen meters across the fields before he was finally able to dispel the force, and his face paled in fear. If not for his swift reaction and superior defense, he could have died right there. That's a formation? The eyes of the crowd narrowed in apprehension. From the current looks of it, it was apparent that the gourd that seemed to be within reach to them was not as easily obtainable as it seemed. The entire area was filled with all kinds of formations, and one would have to overcome all of them before reaching the gourd. I was stuck at this point the previous time I came here, too. I was unable to overcome the formations. Luo Shenqing nodded. The previous time he was there, through his superior comprehension of spatial laws, he had managed to advance much deeper than Yuan Xiao did. Nevertheless, he was still unable to get close to the gourd, as if it could only be watched from afar. Zhongshe, are you able to recognize what kind of formation that is? Bai Hongyan asked. That isn't a formation. Zhongxian shook his head. It isn't. The crowd was perplexed by those words. It's a type of manipulation of space. To summarize, it's somewhat similar to the seals in the subterranean gallery that serve to keep the otherworldly demonic tribe at bay. The stronger an individual is, the greater the rebound they will face from the seal. On the other hand, if the individual isn't a cultivator, they won't face any rebound at all, Zhongshen explained. He had triggered his library of Heaven's Path previously when Yuan Xiao was attacked by the seal, and it was through the book compiled that he realized that it was a utilization of space instead. So, it should do as long as we suppress our cultivation, right? Luo Shenqing glanced at the injured Yuan Xiao and frowned. I'll give it a try then. Regardless of whether Zhongxian was right or not, someone would have to give it a try. Since Yuan Xiao was injured, he could only do the job himself. Taking a deep breath, he sealed the zhenqi within his body, making him appear no different from an ordinary human. Cultivators who had reached his level were already more than capable of concealing their zhenqi completely in their dantian, making them appear to be no different from ordinary humans. On top of that, it seemed like Luo Shenqing was using some kind of secret art to suppress his cultivation even further, such that Zhongxian would not be able to tell even with his eye of insight without examining closely. Incredible! Zhongxian remarked excitedly. He had seen plenty of techniques that would allow one to conceal one's aura and cultivation, but those would usually fail before the eye of insight. It was truly frightening that Luo Xuanqing's secret art was able to deceive him too. Noticing the shocked gazes all around, Luo Shenqing explained, it's a technique created by our old ancestor. It uses folded space to seal and conceal one's strength, making it impossible to circumvent even through spiritual perception. Yuan Zhongxian nodded before moving on to grimly warn, after proceeding in, no matter what you encounter, you mustn't tap into your cultivation. Remember, the higher the cultivation, the greater the rebound. The surrounding space was reminiscent of a wooden log floating atop a body of water. The more one tried to push it down, the faster and more forceful it would push back. Only ordinary humans would be able to remain unfazed by its attacks. Yuan Luo Shenqing nodded as he took a step forward. As expected, due to his sealed cultivation, he really did not come under attack at all. However, barely after taking a few steps, his face suddenly paled. It seemed as if he had been through something inconceivable, and the fear in his eyes was palpable. Don't release the seal on your cultivation. Zhongxian bellowed upon noticing Luo Xuanqing's peculiar state. However, before he could finish his words, his future brother-in-law still failed to hold it in, and zhenqi gushed out of his body. Boom! A resounding explosion sounded, and just like Yuan Xiao, he was sent flying as well. Brother Luo! Alarmed, Zhongxian hurriedly rushed forward and passed over a recovery pill infused with his Heaven's Path zhenqi. Luo Shenqing took the pill and swallowed, and a moment later, when his injuries alleviated slightly, he opened his eyes once more and shook his head apologetically. I'm fine. I told you earlier that you mustn't tap into your cultivation no matter what you encounter. Zhongxian frowned. Why did you still? He had made it loud and clear to the other party that he had to suppress his cultivation by hook or by crook, but barely 3 breaths after entering, the other party forgot what he said and was forcefully thrown out. "Aren't you a little too absent-minded? I encountered an illusion in there, and I saw someone bullying my younger sister. That's why I wasn't able to hold myself back," Luo Shenqing replied awkwardly. He had resolved himself to keep his cultivation firmly suppressed at all costs prior to entering the area of the seal, but as soon as he saw his younger sister being bullied by others, all of those thoughts instantaneously vanished from his mind. Hearing those words, Zhongxian could not help but shake his head with a helpless smile. As expected of this overly affectionate brother. Despite knowing that it was an illusion, he was still unable to stop himself from making a move. "The little princess is much stronger than you in terms of fighting prowess, so what can you possibly do against an opponent who can even bully her?" Bai Hongyan grumbled in displeasure by the side. Yun Lianhai and the others also found themselves speechless after hearing what Luo Shenqing had said. The little princess of the Luo clan did not just possess superior talents in cultivation, more importantly, she had assimilated the dimension silencer. With just a mere thought, she would be able to seal the surrounding space and crush even Saint 9 Dan experts with ease. Considering that Luo Shenqing was only at Saint 7 Dan, how could he possibly help his younger sister? If there was anyone who had to do the protecting, it was the little princess. "My strength might be beneath my younger sister's, but I still won't hesitate to pit my life against anyone who dares bully her," Luo Shenqing declared with conviction. A hint of gentleness and sadness surfaced in his eyes. "Our mother died while we were very young, so she became my only true kin in the Luo clan. Thus, I resolved myself to not allow the slightest grievance to come to her." "Is that why you harbor such deep enmity for the Zhong clan?" Zhong Xian asked. "Indeed. In terms of bloodline purity, that bastard young prodigy of the Zhong clan is indeed worthy of my younger sister. However, he's so arrogant that ever since the engagement was set, he has never appeared before my younger sister, not even once. This is a show of blatant disrespect and disregard toward my younger sister. How can I possibly not be mad at him?" Luo Shenqing harumphed coldly. Recalling that fellow who was snatching his girlfriend from him, Zhongxian puffed up in rage too. He could not help but agree. That bastard young prodigy of the Zhong clan really needs someone to pull him off his high horse. If he was the one who was engaged with Luo Ruoxin, he would surely spend every single second of his life by her side. "That's right," Luo Shenqing roared furiously. "If I ever catch sight of that bastard young prodigy, I'll definitely smash his head into his neck." "That's right." Zhongxian waved his hand grandly and said imposingly, "Count me in. I'll make that bastard young prodigy crawl all over the ground, searching for his teeth." Watching as the enraged duo lashed out at the young prodigy of the Zhong clan, Yuan Xiao, Bai Hongyan, and Yun Lianhai glanced at one another in bewilderment. And this bewilderment was directed right at Zhongxian. It's understandable that Luo Shenqing is worried that his younger sister will have to spend her life in misfortune. But as an outsider, why on earth are you getting involved in this matter for? Not to mention, to even get so indignant at the matter. Is there really a need for that? Unable to withstand it anymore, Yuan Xiao turned to Zhongxian and cleared his throat. "Ahem. Zhongsha, if I recall correctly, the young prodigy of the Zhong clan shouldn't have offended you before, right?" Zhongxian was stunned for a moment as he recalled his current position, so he fumbled for a moment before hurriedly replying, "I am just feeling a little indignant for Brother Luo. To anger someone as kind and tolerant as Brother Luo to such an extent, that bastard young prodigy must definitely be a shameless and despicable scoundrel. As master teachers, we have the responsibility to teach such scum of the world a lesson they will never forget." The crowd glanced at one another. Kind and tolerant. Well, putting that aside, there was not anything wrong with what the young man was saying, but why did feel like there was something rather weird about his words? Luo Shenqing was also slightly taken aback by Zhongxian's impassioned response. He took a closer look and noted that the young man was truly furious. It was not just an act to win his favor. Thus, he could not help but remark, "What a great brother you are. Why aren't you my brother-in-law?" Chapter 1358 3 Dan Heavenly Art of Dimension Unravel. Knowing that the others would get suspicious if he continued dwelling on this matter, Zhongxian decisively changed the topic. Brother Yuan and Brother Luo are injured, so I'll be counting on you to take care of them. I'll head in to take a look. Let me do it instead. Bai Hongyan stepped forward and said, I specialize in dealing with illusions and soul attacks, so I should be able to withstand them better. All right then. Zhongxian hesitated for a moment before nodding. There's a good chance that there are many different formations in there, so be careful. Make sure that you don't use your cultivation regardless of the situation. The illusion formation was a separate entity from the spatial seal, which was the reason why Zhongxian did not notice it through the library of Heaven's Path. Otherwise, he would have surely reminded Luo Shenqing in advance. Bai Hongyan nodded before sealing her cultivation completely. Her ability to seal her cultivation was not as absolute as Luo Xuanqing's, so Zhongxian was still able to see through her using his eye of insight. However, she was still able to keep her zhenqi from emanating, and the formation was unlikely to be sensitive enough to sense the zhenqi concealed in her dantian either. The young lady began proceeding forward, and in just a few steps, she arrived at where Luo Shenqing and Yuan Xiao came under attack. As if something had come to her vision too, she abruptly stopped as well. Be careful. Yun Lianhai could not help but remind her. There's no point shouting. The spatial seal in there prevents sound and even one's spiritual perception from getting through. Luo Shenqing shook his head. It seals off spiritual perception as well? Astonished, Zhongxian tried to extend his spiritual perception over, but upon reaching a certain point, his spiritual perception seemed to disappear in an abyss. No matter how he pushed on, he was unable to sense anything at all. It was a very perplexing and bizarre situation. It was obviously something that was right before them, but due to a profound manipulation of space, it felt like these two spaces were in completely different worlds. Amid everyone's worried gazes, Bai Hongyan continued advancing forward steadily, but eventually, she was still unable to hold herself back from driving her zhenqi, and as a result of that, she was jolted out of the spatial seal just like everyone else. Zhongxian rushed over and asked, what happened? After entering the spatial seal, I was teleported into another space where a saint beast was rampaging all around, devouring everyone in its sight. Unable to withstand it, I could only make a move in the end, Bai Hongyan explained with a reddened face. She had been determined to suppress her cultivation down to the very end, but she simply could not bring herself to stand by as the saint beast attempted to bite off the head of a child. Teleported? But you didn't move at all. Yun Lianhai exclaimed. All of them could clearly see Bai Hongyan with their own eyes, so there was no way she could have been teleported somewhere else. Don't you think it's weird that we are able to look into the spatial seal despite being unable to perceive it with our spiritual perception? Luo Shenqing suddenly interjected. This. Yun Lianhai fell into deep thought. Sometimes, what the eye saw might not necessarily be real. Just like mirages in the desert, no matter how lifelike and authentic they seemed to the thirsty explorers, they were actually all illusions. The reason cultivators believed in their spiritual perception was because they were extending their consciousness directly toward their surroundings to perceive it, so it was much more unlikely for them to perceive something incorrectly. In their current situation, they were indeed able to see the entire situation clearly with their eyes, but who could guarantee that what they were seeing was real? Brother Yun, can you help us sense if that Dongshu gourd is real? Zhongxian suddenly spoke up. All right. Yun Lianhai nodded. If what they were seeing within the spatial seal was false, there was a good chance that the Dongshu gourd could be fake as well. A droplet of blood flew toward Yun Lianhai's glabella, and an eye abruptly opened up between his brows. The eye quickly turned its gaze toward the gourd in the sky. A moment later, he shook his head and said, I can't sense the presence of any treasure. You can't sense it? Luo Xuanqing's face turned pale. He had prepared for a very long time in order to acquire this Dongshu gourd. If it turned out to be an illusion, he really might break into tears. Let me take a look at it, Zhongxian said with a frown. He could not make a clear assessment of the situation with what they had gathered so far, so the most effective way was for him to enter the spatial seal personally to check things out. Be careful, Luo Shenqing instructed. Yuan taking a deep breath, Zhongxian suppressed his cultivation before making his way into the spatial seal. The method he used to seal his cultivation was not as advanced as Luo Shenqing, but the zhenqi he cultivated was the Heaven's Path zhenqi. As long as he willed it so, not even Saint Nine Dan experts would be able to discern his level of cultivation, let alone the others. As soon as he entered the spatial seal, his surroundings abruptly turned completely white. He tried to extend his spiritual perception to the limits, but he was still unable to perceive anything at all. It was as if he was standing amid a barren land where he was the only man existent within this world. Luo Shenqing and the others had already vanished without a trace, as if they had not even been there in the first place. This sure is a little unnerving. Zhongxian thought with a frown as he slowly proceeded ahead. Shortly after, a mountain range appeared before his sight. After which, he arrived before a waterfall with a lake at the bottom. The cascading water sounded deafening in the surroundings. This is. Taking a closer look, Zhongxian's heart began beating in agitation. He had been there before. That was where he had first met Luo Ruoxin, the verdant mountains of the Huanyu mountain range. In this very place, he had witnessed countless spirit beasts gathering around the waterfall, and he had thought that they were intending to do Luo Ruoxin harm. So, he had charged forward in the hope of saving her. That was how they had first met. He quickly turned his gaze over to the waterfall, and a beautiful figure stood calmly over there. Just as always, she stood with an air of indifference, reminiscent of an inviolable lotus. It seemed as if there was nothing in this world that would be able to faze her. Ruoxin. This was not the first time they had met one another, but even so, Zhongxian's heart still could not help but skip a beat as if it was the first time. He had thought that he would be able to meet Luo Ruoxin as soon as he came to the Sanctum of Sages, but as he came to learn more about their current situation, he felt more pressured. It was to the point where he was not sure how he could face her anymore. Even so, the yearning in his heart never died down even for a moment. On the contrary, it had only been growing stronger with time. No, this isn't real. This is just an illusion. Clenching his fists tightly, Zhongxian endured his urge to charge over, and his breathing gradually calmed down as well. His mind had been confused for a moment, but as rationality slowly returned to him, he recalled that he was in the midst of finding the Dongshu Gourd, and there was no way he could appear in the verdant mountain all of a sudden, let alone meet Luo Ruoxin. Even if it was not an illusory formation, it was likely to be some clever manipulation of folded space that allowed for the reflection of his memories. Having calmed down, Zhongxian was just about to advance forward when a sharp glint of light suddenly flashed across the sky. In the blink of an eye, it sliced right across Luo Ruoxin's body. Following which, a young man with a vile look on his face appeared before Luo Ruoxin, and he uttered with a cold sneer, "You are my fiancé, but you fell in love with someone else. Since that's the case, why don't you just drop dead?" The young man had a demented look in his eyes, and his facial features were deeply reminiscent of Zhong Chun. But for some reason, the young man seemed to bear some resemblance to him too. The young prodigy of the Zhong clan. Zhongxian gritted his teeth in fury. How dare that bastard young prodigy of the Zhong clan make a move against Luo Ruoxin? His courting death. Just as Zhongxian was about to unseal his cultivation, the library of Heaven's Path in his mind jolted. For an instant, he felt as if a resounding bell had chimed right next to his ear, causing his body to stiffen in shock. He was forcefully jolted back to rationality, and he told himself, it's just an illusion. It's just an illusion. At the same time, he drove his state of mind swiftly and re-entered the state of heart of tranquil water. When he looked over once more, the young prodigy had already disappeared, and Luo Ruoxin was nowhere to be seen. In fact, even the entire verdant mountain had vanished. Everything had returned to a completely white space. That was a close shave, Zhongxian thought as cold sweat trickled down his body. Even though he knew that it was an illusion, he still could not help himself from making a move upon seeing Luo Ruoxin being injured. It seemed like the spatial seal did not just seek to confound, it intended to play on the emotions and feelings of others as well. Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. It's fortunate that I have the library of Heaven's Path, or else I would have been jolted out like Luo Shenqing and the others. Just as he was about to proceed ahead once more, he suddenly felt the ground beneath him giving way, and he abruptly plummeted downward. The piercing whistling of the wind reverberated in his ears. When he lowered his head, he could see the earth accelerating toward him at a fearsome speed, and it seemed like he would collide anytime soon. He had suppressed his cultivation entirely, so his current strength was only at that of an ordinary human. If he fell from such a height, he would definitely lose his life. In response to the danger perceived, his junchi began jumping into action, attempting to push its way out of the seal so that he could break the fall. It's an illusion. It's an illusion. Zhongxian suppressed his junchi with greater force as he slowly closed his eyes. If not for what he had experienced earlier, he surely would have succumbed. However, the previous experience had left him prepared for whatever was to come, so he was no longer as panicked or affected as before. If he really used his junchi, the spatial seal would immediately rebound against him, and that would cause him to get injured. As soon as his heart had returned to perfect calmness, the deafening whistling of the wind and the falling sensation disappeared without a trace. When he opened his eyes once more, he found himself still standing amid the white space. Using space to conjure effects reminiscent of illusions, I have never really thought of that possibility before. Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief as he examined his surroundings once more. His comprehension of formations had reached the level of 8-star pinnacle, and he had learned the heavenly art of dimension unravel as well. Under normal circumstances, a folded space would not be able to trap him. However, this place was actually able to breach his mental fortitude without him sensing that anything was amiss. The means of the owner of the ancient domain were truly astounding. Activating his eye of insight, Zhongxian noted that the structure of the surrounding space was reminiscent of a beehive, consisting of small cubes placed together. However, unlike an ordinary beehive, the cubes were not stationary. Instead, they were flowing along with drifting water, forcing one to go along with its momentum and fall under its effects. Space is basically ripples moving at a frequency. As long as I can find the true nature of this space, I'll be able to manipulate it too, Zhongxian thought as he went through what he had learned in the heavenly art of dimension unravel. Some time later, Zhongxian's eyes lit up. I see. Through analyzing the structure of the space around him, the various parts of the heavenly art of dimension unravel that did not make sense to him previously suddenly made complete sense. Back when he cultivated the heavenly art of dimension unravel, his cultivation was still a little too low, making it highly difficult for him to comprehend the deeper nature of space. However, with his cultivation being raised to leaving aperture realm pinnacle, he was able to better analyze the space around him and advance his understanding of spatial laws to a higher level. Zhongxian nodded in realization. It's no wonder this spatial seal is able to evoke illusions. Space can be formed using formations, and the inverse is true as well. So, naturally, it can be used to influence the thoughts of others as well. Formations could be used to set up space, and space could be set up as formation. Building on this, that would mean that it was possible to embed formations within space itself to make one see the things that they desired the most. Exhaling a mouthful of turbid gas, Zhongxian's eyes glowed in excitement. Having comprehended this, my understanding of space should have reached the level of control. There were mainly 5 levels of the heavenly art of dimension unravel, namely compress, traverse, control, creation, and destruction. Compress allowed one to compress space and hasten one's movements. Traverse could be considered as a deepening of the concept of compress. Through a greater understanding of space, one would be able to execute movements reminiscent of teleportation, covering a distance of several hundred meters in an instant. One who had comprehended this realm would be able to breach the dominion of a phantasm space realm expert without being affected by the latter's control of space. Control referred to gaining the ability to manipulate space. Upon reaching this realm, folded space and the sort would no longer be able to trap one. In fact, one would even be able to tap into the strength harnessed within these spaces to suppress one's opponent. As for creation and destruction, Zhongxian still had not managed to fully comprehend those two concepts. He could tell that the creator of this ancient domain had reached the level of creation at the very least, but for the time being, he still could not say for sure what creation in terms of space represented. Since I have managed to reach the 3-dan heavenly art of dimension unravel, This spatial seal won't be able to trap me any longer. Zhongxian chuckled inwardly. With his current comprehension of spatial laws, this beehive-like space was an enigma to him no more. Even the various formations embedded into the spatial seal that induced illusions in his head earlier also appeared clearly before his eyes, and he could destroy him on a whim. I should leave now. Zhongxian drove his zhenqi and lightly waved his hand. Then, he took a step forward, and the next moment, he was standing right before the river. A lush green gourd floated right before him, emanating an overpowering aura. Chapter 1359. Zhongxian got beaten up. The river was a spirit vein, and the spiritual energy flowing through it was so concentrated that it felt almost tangible. The gourd was just hanging right beneath it, absorbing the spiritual energy as nutrition and growing slowly. Now, I just have to pluck it and take it back. Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. If he wanted to level up, he just had to collect sufficient cultivation technique manuals and spirit stones. As valuable as the Dongshu gourd was, it was of very little use to him. It would be more worth it for him to use it to develop a good relationship with Luo Shenqing. As long as he could win Luo Xuanqing's goodwill and get him to speak up on his behalf later when vying for Luo Ruoxin's hand in marriage, everything would be worth the effort. Thus, he reached out to grab the Dongshu gourd. Even though he did not use any strength, with his comprehension of heavenly art of dimension unravel reaching 3 dan, his grasp easily caused the surrounding space to turn viscous. As if a fish trapped in a net, all escape routes for the gourd were sealed. Just as Zhongxian's hand was just about to reach the gourd, the lush fruit suddenly woke up and began struggling. Catcher! The sealed space immediately broke, and Zhongxian felt an overwhelming force pressing down on him, threatening to grind his arm down to dust. Zhongxian narrowed his eyes in astonishment. He quickly drove his zhenqi to form a massive barrier before him. With his enhanced comprehension of space, even if he were to drive his zhenqi now, he would not suffer a rebound from the spatial seal. The gourd hanging on the vine shook its bottom. Sila. The massive barrier was immediately torn apart as if it was a piece of paper. Zhongxian hurriedly placed his hands up to guard against the attack. An intense pain assaulted his arm, and the next moment, he was smacked down onto the ground. With a pale face, Zhongxian struggled to his feet. His entire arm had already gone numb from the impact, and his bones were creaking in protest, as if saying that they would shatter if they had to endure any more than that. Zhongxian's physical body had currently reached a level of resilience on par with half-saint high-tier artifacts. Thus, he would not feel anything even if a saint intermediate-tier artifact tried to slice him. Yet, with a slight shake, the gourd was able to leave him in such pain. The strength of the gourd had far surpassed his imagination. Damn it! Zhongxian quickly drove his Heaven's Path zhenqi to recuperate from his wounds as he glared at the gourd with reddened eyes. I don't believe that I won't be able to capture you. Taking in a deep breath, he flicked his wrist, and a sword appeared in his palm. With a slight flick, a burst of sword qi shot toward the gourd. The Lingshu sword. Considering how the Dongshu gourd could help one achieve a breakthrough to dimension-sundering realm, its tier was probably quite high. Having suffered against it a moment ago, Zhongxian dared not take the gourd lightly, so he used his most powerful weapon right from the start. TZZZZZZ. As soon as the Lingshu sword appeared, the surrounding space immediately began distorting, seemingly ready to be torn apart at any moment. In the first place, folded spaces were not as stable as the spaces outside. On top of that, Zhongxian had already comprehended the 3rd dan of heavenly art of dimension unravel. Even if he could not rip the folded space open, it was not too difficult for him to create a distortion in it. Watching as a burst of sword qi flew in its direction, the gourd shook its body once more, reminiscent of a large-bottomed individual flaunting their figure. TZ La. A powerful shockwave rippled from the gourd, halting the incoming sword qi in place, preventing it from moving even an inch closer. This. Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up. Even though he did not use the 3 swords of Lingshu, he had still harnessed its offensive sword quintessence in the attack. Not even a Saint 7 Dan Phantasm Space Realm primary stage expert would dare take the attack head-on. Yet, just by shaking its body, the gourd actually managed to neutralize his attack. Was it not a little too strong for a mere gourd? Knowing that he could not afford to hold back, Zhongxian quickly whipped out 108 swords and commanded them to attack. Go! Su! A barrage of sword qi instantaneously filled the area as the zhenqi in Zhongxian was swiftly sapped dry. The 108 swords warped into flashes of cold light as they charged in the direction of the gourd. Pada! The gourd also seemed to sense the devastating might wielded in the move, and it shook its bottom even more joyously. Puha! Due to its excessively large movements, it dropped off the vine and flew over in Zhongxian's direction. Boom boom boom! It clashed directly with the sword qi, sending ripples diffusing into the surroundings amid brilliant bursts of colorful light. As powerful as the sea-severing sword was, it seemed to be completely ineffective on the gourd. The sword's qi simply bounced off it without causing the slightest mark on its surface. Instead, the gourd was even able to speed up in the midst of those attacks, tiding across the entire barrage of attack in just an instant. It's actually so powerful. Zhongxian narrowed his eyes in astonishment. Sea-severing sword was already his strongest move, and even Yuan Xiao and the others would suffer a great deal if they were to take the attack head-on. Yet, it was actually so easily neutralized by the gourd. This was really inconceivable. Was it normal for gourds to be that powerful? However, the gourd also did not plan on allowing Zhongxian any time to rest. Right after breaking through the sea-severing sword, it slammed its body forcefully toward his chest. After executing the 3 swords of Lingshu, the zhenqi in his body was already on the verge of running dry. Fortunately, with the recent breakthrough in his physical body cultivation and soul cultivation, he was not completely powerless without zhenqi anymore. Without any hesitation, he raised both of his palms while driving the Heaven's Path Soul Art to draw upon his soul energy to augment his defenses. Peng! The crisp sound of a shattering bone echoed clearly in the air. Zhongxian's arm had fractured under the impact. His body was sent flying into the distance before crashing heavily onto the ground. This short encounter had caused several bones of his ribcage to shatter as well. Despite being a mere artifact, the fighting prowess of the Dongshu gourd was simply too powerful. If not for the sea-severing sword neutralizing a portion of the offense, that previous slam would have left him completely incapacitated. Su. Before Zhongxian could climb up from the ground, the gourd shook a little in the air and charged toward him once more. This time, its movement was way faster than before, to the point where its figure was nothing more than a slight blur. It seemed as though it would not rest until it was able to smash him into his grave. Zhongxian's face paled. In a frontal encounter, he was completely no match for the Dongshu gourd. On top of that, his zhenqi was completely expended at the moment, and he was severely injured as well. If he allowed the gourd's attack to fall on him, he really might just lose his life there and then. Spatial seal. Clone. Zhongxian was not sure whether those outside were able to see what was happening within, but to prevent Luo Shenqing and the others from seeing his trump card, he still snapped his fingers to seal the surrounding space, preventing anyone from seeing what was within. At the same time, he released his clone. After cultivating the Heaven's Path Soul Art, the prowess of his clone had risen by leaps and bounds. Its fighting prowess was significantly higher than his, so it should at least be able to defend against the Dongshu gourd for some time. Who? As soon as his clone appeared, Zhongxian immediately filled him in on the situation through their telepathic connection, and the other party charged forward to engage the Dongshu gourd. However, as fast as his clone was, he was still lacking compared to the Dongshu gourd. Before he could even throw a punch, the latter was right before him. Pada! The Dongshu gourd crashed right into his clone's face, imprinting its shape onto his face. Screw you! Zhongxian's clone immediately went berserk. How dare you hurt my handsome face? I'm going to kill you. Each time he was released from the myriad ant hive nest, he would derive great joy from mocking his main body and flaunting his overwhelming strength. But this time, before he could say or achieve anything, he ended up being quashed by a mere gourd instead. This unprecedented humiliation left him feeling so angry that it felt as if he would explode from sheer rage. While roaring, the clone did not forget to throw a furious punch toward the Dongshu gourd too. Boom! It was a direct hit, but the clone felt a jolt run through his body instead. With quivering lips, he quickly turned to the main body and said, I can't defeat him. You should quickly run away. Even though his fighting prowess was far stronger than the real Zhongxian's, it was still a huge way off from matching up to the gourd before him. Run away? Zhongxian hesitated upon hearing those words. He was here to obtain the gourd for Luo Shenqing, and to run away after all the effort they had put into this mission was really a little hard to accept. If you aren't going to run, you can face that fellow yourself. I won't be accompanying you. Goodbye, the clone roared with gritted teeth. Under the furious onslaught of the gourd, his body already bore no semblance of a human anymore. Of course you can still afford to hesitate when all you are doing is hiding behind my back. If you don't want to run away, why don't you try facing this monster of a gourd yourself? All right then. Zhongxian nodded with a reddened face. He also knew that he would not be a match for the Dongshu gourd with his zhenqi sapped dry at the moment, so without any hesitation, he waved his hand and withdrew his clone and all of the swords back into the myriad ant hive nest and his storage ring respectively before fleeing back the way he had come. Catcher. However, it seemed like the Dongshu gourd still had no intention of letting him off. It charged over in his direction once more with the same astounding speed that was nigh impossible to dodge, so he had no choice but to reinforce his defenses and brace himself against the impact. He was sent flying once more, but fortunately, he had managed to retreat back to the area where the illusions were generated once more, and with a flash, his figure vanished from the spot. Before vanishing from the spot, Zhongxian vaguely saw the gourd in the sky shaking its bottom triumphantly before leisurely made its way back to the vine and hanging itself back on it. In the blink of an eye, everything returned to normal, as if nothing had happened at all. Some time ago prior to Zhongxian's fight with the Dongshu gourd. After seeing the young man off into the spatial seal, Luo Shenqing and the others could not help but pace around the area worriedly. Zhongshe should be fine, right? Zhongshe has a deep understanding of formations. Even though this isn't exactly a formation, it does bear some resemblance to one. I think he should be fine. As long as he can resist the urge to release his cultivation, he won't be affected by the rebound of the spatial seal. Even though these were the words that they spoke, uncertainty and apprehension still continued to plague their hearts. This was especially so for Luo Shenqing. He had paid a heavy price in order to obtain the Dongshu gourd, and if he could not touch it after all that, he would really be at a loss. Look, Zhongshe is heading forward, Yuan Xiao said. The crowd quickly turned their heads over and saw Zhongxian slowly making his way over to the gourd in the sky. However, barely after taking 2 steps, he abruptly vanished from the spot. He must have cleared the illusions. Luo Xuanqing's eyes lit up in agitation. However, just 2 breaths later, a figure suddenly flew out of the spatial seal, and with a resounding peng it crashed into the ground just beside them, coughing huge mouthfuls of blood. Zhongshe. Horrified, the crowd hurriedly rushed toward him worriedly. I am fine. As he struggled to his feet, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. It was fortunate that he had fled swiftly, decisively leaping out of the spatial seal. Otherwise, he could have died at the hands of that fellow. Looking at the severe wounds that Zhongxian had sustained, Luo Shenqing could not help but ask, was Zhongshe also evicted by the spatial seal? They had all been injured by the spatial seal due to them unintentionally exerting their strength while inside. Could it be that the young man had faced the same inside too? But his wounds appeared to be slightly different from the ones they had sustained though. That's not it. Zhongxian shook his head. What happened? The intrigued Yuan Xiao asked. Could it be that other than the spatial seal, there was still something else within the space that could hurt them? If that was really the case, they would have to proceed carefully. I was. With a face filled with embarrassment, Zhongxian scratched his head and said, attacked by a gourd. Chapter 1360 Vine. It was no wonder Zhongxian would be so crestfallen by the matter. All along, he had performed splendidly before his future brother-in-law, even impressing the latter through the taming of the netherworld azure dragon beast. His image in the latter's heart should have been flawless and impeccable, but who would have thought that a mere gourd would undo all of his efforts at this critical juncture? It was one thing if he could not defeat a saint beast or an artifact, but for even a gourd hanging on a vine to pummel him to the point where he was forced to flee frantically as if a mischievous son being evicted out of his house, This must really be the greatest humiliation in his life. You were pummeled by a gourd. Luo Shenqing was startled for a moment before he finally understood what was going on. That means to say that, Zhongshe, you have met the Dongshu gourd? So, that thing really exists, and what we see isn't just an illusion? That's right. Zhongshen nodded. Due to Yun Lianhai saying that he could not sense the presence of a treasure, everyone's heart was left on an edge, fearing that their efforts had all gone to waste. Zhongshen's reassurance made all of them heave a sigh of relief. Since it really existed, they still stood a chance then. Seeing the dejected look on Zhongshen's face, Luo Shenqing patted his shoulders and consoled him. As an item that could help others comprehend the dimension-sundering realm, its fighting prowess is likely to be on par with Saint 8 Dan primary stage experts. As talented as you are, Zhongshe, your cultivation is still only at Saint 5 Dan, leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle, a great distance from it. It's only natural that you won't be a match for it. In fact, even I won't fare too well against it. Considering how the Dongshu gourd raised the chances of a cultivator achieving a breakthrough to the dimension-sundering realm by 50%, how could it possibly be anything ordinary? As long as one's strength was not on par, putting aside capturing it, even if one were to capture it, there was no way one would be able to assimilate it. It was only after hearing those words that Zhongshen finally felt a little better inside. He turned to the crowd and said, I have already deciphered the crux to the spatial seal before us, and I'll bring you all to the gourd later on. However, I just want to warn all of you beforehand that the fellow is extremely violent, and there's a good chance that it'll make a move on us as soon as it sees us. So, I think you all should heal up first and condition your physical state to your peak. All right then. The crowd nodded before taking a seat. Zhongshen took a seat as well. He opened up his acupoints and swiftly absorbed the spiritual energy in the surroundings so as to replenish the zhenqi that he had lost earlier and heal his wounds. Thanks to the concentrated spiritual energy that was present in the folded space, it took him less than 4 hours to recover completely. While reinforcing his cultivation, Zhongshen began strategizing against the Dongshu gourd. That gourd is really a little too powerful. It won't be easy to deal with it even with our current forces. He had considered several ideas, but after some careful rumination, they did not seem to be feasible against the Dongshu gourd. Just as Luo Shenqing had said, that fellow was likely to possess fighting prowess on par with dimension-sundering realm primary stage experts, a level that was far beyond the current them. Unless, he released Vicious Finger and Head to collaborate with Luo Shenqing and the others. But of course, that would mean exposing Vicious existence, and for a master teacher to be rearing an otherworldly demon. If the matter got out, he would surely draw the wary gaze of the master teacher pavilion headquarters upon him, and there was a chance that his master teacher license might even be revoked. After quite some thought, Zhongshen was still unable to think of any good ideas. In this moment, Luo Shenqing and the others suddenly stood up and said, let's head off. While they had sustained rather severe injuries from the earlier rebound of the spatial seal, after swallowing the recovery pill that Zhongshen had given them and utilizing the various means they possessed, they had managed to mostly recover from their wounds. Make sure to follow closely behind me. Don't even stray off by a single step, Zhongshen instructed severely. Understanding the dangers that lay within the spatial seal, the others nodded. Zhongshen swiftly sealed his cultivation before taking the lead into the seal. Having comprehended the 3-Dan heavenly art of dimension unravel, his grasp over space was stronger than ever. On top of that, he had already comprehended the secret of the spatial seal, so in truth, there was no longer any danger in here for him. In terms of absolute ability to manipulate space, Luo Shenqing was likely a little stronger than him, but within the spatial seal, Luo Shenqing would not even be able to come close to matching to him. With the prior experience of traveling through the spatial seal, the second attempt proceeded much smoother. It did not take too long for them to arrive in the vicinity of the river of spiritual energy, and they could clearly see the gourd hanging just beneath it. It's the Dongshu gourd. Luo Xuanqing's body trembled in agitation. He could not see it clearly from afar, but now that he was already in its vicinity, he could see that it was the Dongshu gourd. If he could assimilate it into his body, his chances of achieving a breakthrough to dimension-sundering realm would be increased by 50%. I don't think that I'll be of much help to you from this point onward, so I'll just wait for you here, Zhongxian said. Unless he were utilized all of his trump cards, his actions would not mean much in comparison to the fighting prowess of the crowd. So, it did not matter whether he involved himself in the fight or not. It's fine, you have already done enough. Luo Shenqing and the others were pumped up. With our strength, we should be able to subdue it easily. Zhongxian raised his clenched fist and gave a cheer of encouragement. Good luck. 3 minutes later, the group was back outside the spatial seal, and Luo Shenqing and the others were lying on the ground with bruised, miserable faces. Their collaboration was superb, and every single move they utilized was well calculated to corner their opponent. Nevertheless, they were still no match for the gourd, and they ended up being viciously pummeled instead. This was especially so for Yuan Xiao. His entire body was covered with round imprints of the Dongshu gourd. Yun Lianhai hesitated for a moment before saying, Zhongshe, why don't you bring the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast in? With it making a move, we should be able to destroy the Dongshu gourd easily. The Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast possessed strength comparable to a Saint 8 Dan Pinnacle expert, and even if the 4 of them collaborated with one another, they still would not be a match for it. With its help, they should be able to subdue the Dongshu gourd with ease. Zhongxian was slightly troubled by that request. It was not that he did not want to do that, but it had not been long since he had constructed an awe-inspiring image before the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast, and if he had to engage its help just to deal with a mere gourd now, his pride could not take it. Besides, the folded space seemed to be constructed in a manner that did not allow Saint 8 Dan experts to enter. Well, it might still be possible for him to bring the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast in if he were to first store the latter in his myriad ant-hive nest before letting it out, but such a course of action could possibly result in the folded space becoming unstable as well. If so, that would cause much more trouble than it was worth. While the crowd was still conflicted as to what they should do, Luo Shenqing suddenly gritted his teeth and resolutely declared, Forget it, I'll use my bloodline ability then. I'll need you all to assist me later on. You are going to use your bloodline ability? Bai Hongyin frowned. Are you certain? You'll have to rest for at least a month if you use it, and that might cause you to lag behind Zhongchun. While activating the bloodline ability would briefly grant an offspring of a sage clan overwhelming fighting prowess, it would also put a great strain on their body. For this reason, they would only choose to resort to it in desperate situations. I know, but as long as I can capture it, I should be able to push for a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan as soon as I recover after the month. This price is something that I can accept. Luo Shenqing replied. Given his current rate of cultivation, he would at least require a few more years or even a decade or 2 of effort before he would be ready to push for a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan. However, with the Dongshu gourd, he should be able to succeed within just 3 months. So, resting for just a month was just a small price to pay. I see. Bai Hongyin nodded. Since you have made up your mind, let's do it. There was no such thing as a free lunch in the world. It would be blind optimism if a person expected to lay his hands on a treasure without giving something in return. Prior to making the journey here, Luo Shenqing had already resolved himself to make sacrifices for this aim. Having come to a decision, they quickly scattered to recuperate from their injuries and condition themselves back to their peak state. 6 hours later, they stood before the Dongshu gourd once more. Hongyin, use your demonic tunes to interfere with its attacks. Yuan Xiao, try to draw the gourd's aggression upon you. Yun Lianhai, you will be going on the offensive alongside me. We only have one chance, so we have to succeed this time around, Luo Shenqing said solemnly. All right. The crowd replied resoundingly. Let's begin then. Luo Shenqing bellowed. The next moment, overwhelming energy began billowing intensely within Luo Xuanqing's body, and it felt like his aura had been lit on fire. Following which, the space around him began to distort randomly. He took a step forward and raised his palm, and the space around the gourd seemed to instantaneously freeze in place. Who? Sensing hostility directed toward it, the gourd immediately charged out indignantly, wanting to strike down its enemy. However, the strength that Luo Shenqing wielded from activating his bloodline was simply too strong. Despite multiple attempts to dash out, The gourd was actually unable to break out of the confined space. Trying ting. Trying ting. The melody of a zither began playing. Bai Hongyan had started her performance. Yuan Xiao and Yun Lianhai also charged forward to make their moves. Watching the happenings, Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief. They should be able to succeed this time around. After activating his bloodline ability, Luo Xuanqing's prowess had more than doubled, and his current strength was not any beneath that of a dimension-sundering realm expert. As expected, one of the top geniuses of the Luo clan, the rise in his fighting prowess from activating his bloodline ability was frightening. He had fought with Zhong Qian in the past, and he had seen the latter activating his Zhong clan bloodline ability as well. Even though Zhong Qian's strength did grow significantly upon the activation, it came nowhere close to comparing to this. It seemed the purer one's bloodline was, the more formidable the effects when one's bloodline ability was activated. While Zhong Xian was still deep in thought, the four experts had managed to suppress the Dongshu gourd to the ground, and they were kicking it furiously. Bai Hongyan even raised her zither and smashed it down on the gourd furiously. Under the crazed onslaught of the crowd, the gourd could only tremble fearfully on the ground, forming a miserable sight in contrast to the arrogance it had shown before. Recalling how badly he was pummeled previously, Zhong Xian nodded in satisfaction at that sight. You sure acted smug just now, didn't you? Take this to your heart. Revenge is a dish best served cold. This is the price you have to pay for acting arrogantly before me. Let's see if you dare do something like that in the future. Knowing that the battle was as good as concluded, Zhong Xian turned his head over to the flowing river of spiritual energy in the sky. This proved that there was indeed a spirit vein within the valley at one point in time, but someone had dug it out from the ground to nourish the Dongshu gourd. On top of that, it had been used to sustain the folded space as well, so at this point in time, it was already on the verge of drying up. What a pity! Zhong Xian sighed deeply. If this spirit vein had only been extracted from the ground not too long ago, the concentration of spiritual energy flowing within it would have been on par with pinnacle spirit stones. While there was still plenty of spiritual energy flowing within the river, the concentration had already dipped considerably. At this moment, its concentration was only equivalent to high-tier spirit stones, so it was not of much use to him anymore. Just as Zhong Xian was about to retract his gaze from the river, he suddenly caught sight of the vine hanging over it in his peripheral vision. This vine seems to be good stuff. It was roughly around the thickness of a finger, but its gleaming, jade-like exterior seemed to suggest that it was rich in spiritual energy. Previously, he had been paying so much attention to the Dongshu gourd that he had neglected it, but examining it intently with his eye of insight, he realized that the vine was actually incredibly resilient, and the concentration of spiritual energy within it was far purer than that of a concentrated high-tier spirit stone. Let me take a closer look. Unable to hold back his curiosity, he flew over with eyes gleaming in excitement. It did not take long before he was standing in front of the vine. The vine had a brilliant green color that was reminiscent of emerald, and it felt cold to the touch. It was hard to put a finger on the feeling that the vine gave him, but it felt like there were countless folded spaces packed densely within it, similar to a beehive. This. Zhong Xian blinked in surprise. He had felt such a sensation from the gourd as well. This should be what others called the power of dimension sundering, which was also what one had to comprehend in order to achieve a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan. He had thought that such a power should only be existent in the gourd, but to think that the vine would carry traces of such power as well. Will I be able to assimilate it? Zhong Xian wondered as he touched it once more, and amid a cooling feeling that rippled through his body from his finger, a book materialized in the library of Heaven's Path. Zhong Xian retracted his finger and took a few steps back away from the vine before immersing his consciousness into the library of Heaven's Path to read the book. Catcher, catcher. However, at this moment, a series of crisp echoes reminiscent of squeals of delight sounded from the vine, and it dashed straight for Zhong Xian. Alarmed, Zhong Xian raised his hand and grasped forward. Store. Who? In the blink of an eye, the vine was deposited into his storage ring. Chapter 1361. You poisoned the wine. The disappearance of the vine seemed to have robbed the river of spiritual energy of its support, and with a resounding boom, it exploded. Rampaging spiritual energy diffused around the folded space, causing the entire folded space to ripple unstably. Sensing the disturbance in the spiritual energy, Luo Shenqing and the others were visibly stunned for a moment. They took a look at their surroundings before swiftly returning to pummeling the gourd. Peng 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 peng. With the 4 Saint 7 Dan experts utilizing all kinds of means and weapons against it, be it swords, sabers, spears, hammers, it did not take long before the gourd was lying completely paralyzed on the ground, seemingly on its final breath. The gourd is going to die if you continue pummeling it. Why don't you rest for a moment before continuing? The alarmed Zhong Xian hurriedly rushed forward to persuade them to stop. Yuan Luo Shenqing waved his hand, and the crowd finally came to a halt. At the same time, he grasped his hand tightly together, and surrounding space distorted to form a bubble around the Dongshu gourd. All right, it's done. Sealing the Dongshu gourd seemed to have sapped the last bit of energy within Luo Shenqing. His face turned pale as he slumped feebly to the ground. There was a time limit on how long the bloodline ability could remain activated for. Back then, Zhong Qian had only used 3 moves before he was unable to lift his fist at all. On the other hand, Luo Shenqing must have executed at least 100 moves considering how long he had fought with the gourd, and that was really an impressive feat. Congratulation. The eyes of Yuan Xiao and the others were filled with envy, but they still clasped their fist and offered their sincere congratulations to Luo Shenqing. Even though they would have loved to make the Dongshu gourd their own, they were not willing to sacrifice their principles for that. Besides, given Luo Shenqing's strength and standing, even though they were considered peers, they dared not offend him either. If not for all of your help, there's no way I could have succeeded, Luo Shenqing said. Just as he was able to place the spatial bubble into his storage ring, he would only be able to assimilate the gourd after conditioning his body back to its peak state. A powerful shockwave abruptly burst forth from the seemingly lifeless gourd. Sila. A huge rift was torn in the spatial bubble, and the gourd dashed out. T. Luo Shenqing narrowed his eyes in horror. He had already depleted all of his strength due to the activation of his bloodline ability, and he could not even summon the slightest bit of energy in his powerless body anymore. If the Dongshu gourd fled at this moment, there was no way he would be able to stop it. Stop right there. Yuan Xiao and the others were startled for a moment, but they swiftly recovered and moved decisively to take down the Dongshu gourd. After all of the suffering they had gone through and effort they had put in to take down the Dongshu gourd, how could they allow it to escape now that they were only a step away from success? Su. However, the gourd seemed to have known their attack trajectories in advance, and with just a slight shake, it managed to avoid the rain of attacks with ease. In the blink of an eye, it accelerated beyond the speed of sound, and it was headed in one specific direction. Toward Zhong Xian. Zhong Xian felt as if ants were running on his scalp, and he nearly fainted on the spot. I didn't even make a move this time around, so why are you coming for me? Zhongshe, be careful. The crowd shouted anxiously. Given how quickly the gourd was moving, Zhong Xian knew that it was already too late for him to hide. Thus, he gritted his teeth and braced himself to withstand the impact of the collision, just as he had done before. As soon as his palm came into contact with the Dongshu gourd, he felt a searing pain assaulting his hand. The Dongshu gourd had actually managed to puncture a glaring hole in his palm, causing fresh blood to spurt all around. In the presence of blood, the Dongshu gourd did not bother dodging at all. Instead, it shook its bottom and prepared to make a second move. Hula. This time, it dashed straight toward Zhong Xian's abdomen. Given the strength of the gourd, should its attack really connect, his intestines would surely be ruptured, resulting in severe injuries. It's not me. I'm not the one who pummeled you just now. The party who wanted to capture you is them, and the party who made a move on you earlier is them too. Why on earth are you coming for me instead? Tears nearly streamed down Zhong Xian's eyes this time around, but he knew that this was no time for crying. He drove his zhunqi and attempted to grab hold of the gourd before it struck its abdomen, but it was futile. He only caught air. But surprisingly, the pain that he had anticipated did not arrive. Instead, the gourd vanished into his abdomen. Zhong Xian was stunned. He had no idea what to make of the current situation. The others also turned doubtful gazes in his direction. Where is the gourd? Zhongxian looked around him anxiously, but the gourd was nowhere to be seen. He used his spiritual perception to gaze inwardly into his body, and his lips suddenly quivered. Why is it in my dantian? Seated lazily in the depths of his dantian was the dongshu gourd. Upon sensing the presence of Zhongxian's spiritual perception, it even intentionally shook its bottom gleefully, as if flaunting its victory. What? Everyone quickly rushed forward and scanned Zhongxian's body with their spiritual perception. A moment later, Luo Shenqing slumped to the ground with a dazed look and muttered, "You have actually assimilated the dongshu gourd into your body." Assimilated? The dongshu gourd can help its owner comprehend the dimension-sundering realm. As long as one assimilates it, one will be able to infuse it into one's dantian, Luo Shenqing explained with his eyes widened in disbelief. However, the assimilation process is extremely complex. Not only does it require the cultivator to tribute their blood essence to it, more importantly, their cultivation must also have reached Saint Seven Dan pinnacle at the very minimum in order to make it acknowledge them as its master. Considering that your cultivation is only at leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle, 2 realms away from Phantasmal Space Realm Pinnacle, just what on earth is going on here? He had put in so much effort and paid such a heavy price before he managed to take down the dongshu gourd, but before he could assimilate it, it ended up diving into someone else's dantian. Luo Shenqing could not help but clutch his suffocated chest, patting it forcefully to alleviate the pain. Zhongxian's face paled upon realizing what had happened, and he anxiously bellowed, "But I never intended to assimilate it. Gourd, you'd better come out right now." He had come here to help his future brother-in-law procure what he needed, and to end up taking it for his own instead. "You are really bent on destroying the noble and righteous image I have established before my future brother-in-law, aren't you? You home wrecker. Hoo-hoo." The gourd continued shaking its body gleefully. "You." Seeing how the gourd continued flaunting its victory smugly, Zhongxian felt so angry that his body quivered in rage. Left with no choice, he could only face Luo Shenqing with a deeply apologetic look. "Brother Luo, I really had no intention of assimilating the dongshu gourd." "I know." Luo Shenqing shook his head and sighed in resignation. Artifacts possess spirit as well. What's not meant to be is simply not meant to be, there's no point forcing it. Even though he felt so stifled that he could spurt a bucketful of fresh blood out at the moment, he still managed to think things through. Given how the dongshu gourd had chosen to dive into Zhongxian's dantian despite all he had done, it could only mean that it had never been interested in him from the start. Zhongxian's face turned scarlet from embarrassment. He really did not know what he should say in such a situation. What the heck was this? He was supposed to be there to help, but with such a happening, who else would dare ask him out to hunt treasures in the future? Zhongxian pondered for a moment before speaking up. Brother Luo's intention of procuring the dongshu gourd is to push for a breakthrough to the dimension-sundering realm, right? If I can help you achieve a breakthrough, would it mean that it wouldn't matter whether you had the dongshu gourd or not? Considering how gleeful the dongshu gourd was acting, it did not seem like it would be coming out anytime soon. This matter could not be considered his fault, but nevertheless, he still felt deeply guilty for taking what should have belonged to Luo Shenqing. "Help me achieve a breakthrough?" Luo Shenqing was visibly surprised by Zhongxian's remark for a moment before he shook his head glumly. Achieving a breakthrough to the dimension-sundering realm is not a small matter. Countless experts in history have been stuck at the phantasmal space realm, unable to take the final step forward. If not for that, I wouldn't have traveled so far and paid such a heavy price to obtain the dongshu gourd. Despite the various miraculous means the young man had displayed so far, the difficulty in achieving a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan was simply too great. Even cultivators who were privileged enough to receive the guidance from a 9-star master teacher might not necessarily be able to take the final step forward, let alone the fact that Zhongxian was only at leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle. "Since this has already happened, why don't you just give it a try?" Zhongxian asked. If it had been a while ago, without having seen any Saint 8 Dan cultivation technique manuals, there was no way he would have been able to help Luo Shenqing achieve a breakthrough even if he could compile a book on the latter's flaws through the Library of Heaven's Path. However, With his comprehension of space achieving the level of 3 Dan heavenly art of dimension unravel, as well as his assimilation of the Dongshu gourd, he had already gained a significant understanding of the power of dimension sundering. With that and the Library of Heaven's Path, he just might be able to help Luo Shenqing achieve a breakthrough to higher realms. Give it a try. With the current state I am in, how can I give it a try? Luo Shenqing said with a bitter smile. The activation of his bloodline ability had depleted all of his energy. Putting aside pushing for a breakthrough to higher realms, even walking normally was an arduous task to the current him. Oh right. Don't worry, I'll find a way to help you alleviate the side effects resulting from the activation of your bloodline ability. Saying those words, Zhongxian immersed his consciousness back in the Library of Heaven's Path and began studying the book he had just compiled on Luo Shenqing. He had compiled this book while Luo Shenqing and the others were fighting against the Dongshu gourd. He had been intending to use it to explore the secrets concerning the unique bloodlines of sage clans, especially since he felt that it would come useful when he vied with the Zhong clan for Luo Ruoxin's hand in marriage. The activation of the bloodline ability would result in damage to one's spirit, mind, and vitality, putting one's body in a state of extreme deficiency. In such a state, the cultivator would be unable to exert any strength, and any forceful attempt to do so would result in one's cultivation declining. Reading the description in the book, Zhongxian's eyebrows knitted together. There was a fundamental limit to one's potential, vitality, and spirit, and the activation of one's bloodline would lead to excessive depletion of those. Without sufficient time, there was no way one could recover to full health. The Heaven's Path Shenqi is able to heal injuries, open up blockages in the meridians, and restore the spirit, mind, vitality of the ill. I wonder if it will be effective in this situation too? Zhongxian wondered. Due to the incredible purity of the Heaven's Path Shenqi, it was able to easily dive into a cultivator's meridians and cells to repair the damaged portions. In a sense, the depletion resulting from the activation of a unique bloodline was a similar problem. Perhaps, it might be of some use. With this thought in mind, Zhongxian looked at Luo Shenqing straight in the eye and said, "Brother Luo, I have thought of a way that could possibly help you recover from your weakened state swiftly." "Oh, what kind of method is it?" Luo Shenqing asked curiously. The young man before him had produced too many miracles in the time they had spent together. While he did not bear too much hope in the matter if there was truly such a method, top-notch sage clans like the Zhong clan and the Luo clan would already have been using it by now. He still wanted to hear what the young man had in mind. Simple. Zhongxian flicked his wrist and passed a vat over with a confident look on his face. "You just have to drink this." "You want me to drink wine?" Luo Shenqing was still wondering what kind of solution the young man had in mind, but to think that it would be this. His eyebrows could not help but shoot up. Bai Hongyan stepped in and intervened. Luo Xuanqing's body is currently in a bad shape. Drinking wine at this moment will only worsen his condition. Are you serious about having Luo Shenqing drink your wine? Look at how frail he is at the moment. Yuan Xiao also stepped forward and offered, "Zhongshe, if you really wish to drink, why don't I accompany you instead?" This is the method to help him recover swiftly from the side effects of activating his bloodline ability, Zhongxian explained to the crowd before turning his gaze back to Luo Shenqing. "Brother Luo, if you believe me, you should give it a try. If it succeeds, I'll help you achieve a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan by today. Even if it fails, it's just a vat of wine. It won't cause too much harm to your current condition." Seeing Zhongxian's insistence, Luo Shenqing hesitated for a moment before nodding slowly. "All right then." He took the wine from Zhongxian's hands and stared at it for a moment before raising his head and gulping down the wine. Gu. As soon as the wine washed down his throat, a spicy feeling arose in Luo Xuanqing's body. However, it did not seem to be making any difference to his current condition at all. Just as he was about to berate the young man for fooling around, his body suddenly shuddered involuntarily. He widened his eyes in astonishment and exclaimed, "This wine! There's something wrong with this wine. You poisoned the wine?" Yuan Xiao immediately turned to Zhongxian with a darkened face, and a powerful aura immediately burst forth from him. "Luo Shenqing. Zhongxian." Chapter 1362 Luo Xuanqing's Breakthrough. No, it's not poison. Luo Xuanqing's complexion is improving. Before Zhongxian could explain himself, Bai Hongyan had spoken up. Her meticulous nature allowed her to immediately notice the slight changes within Luo Xuanqing. Even though Luo Xuanqing still looked as weak as before, unable to draw forth the slightest strength in his body, redness had started returning to his previously ghastly pale face. Seeing that he had misunderstood Zhongxian, Yuan Xiao hurriedly reined in his aura and scratched his head in embarrassment. He had seen how the young man had poisoned the Crimson-Tail Wasp King to death and declared that he would poison Zhong Chun to death, so as soon as Luo Xuanqing said that there was something wrong with the wine, the first thing that came to his mind was that the wine was poisoned. Gudong. Gudong. It did not take long for Luo Xuanqing to down the entire vat of fine wine. Without his zhenqi protecting his body, he swiftly became intoxicated by the high concentration of alcohol in the wine. Nevertheless, his complexion and body seemed to have recovered significantly from before. If he had appeared to be a terminally ill patient who seemed like he was standing at the gates to hell a moment ago, right now, he seemed more like a young man who had just been afflicted with a slight fever or something. Luo Xuanqing looked at Zhongxian with glazed eyes and asked, "Is there still any more wine?" "Here you go." Zhongxian took out another vat and passed it over. "Thank you." Taking the vat, Luo Xuanqing began gulping it down in huge mouthfuls. It was an established fact that after the activation of one's bloodline ability, one would be unable to exert any might for an entire month. Yet, just by drinking a vat of wine, he felt the frailty that seemed to plague him right from the depths of his body starting to vanish. This was something that was unbelievable to him. One must know that the frailty after activating one's bloodline ability was a problem that had plagued sage clans for countless years. Much research had been done to alleviate the problem, but there was still no feasible and affordable solution to resolve it. But as he gulped down more and more wine, he could feel his vitality swiftly coming back to him, returning to his peak state. By the time he was done with the second vat of wine, all frailty he felt had already vanished without a trace. "Zhongsha." The astounded Luo Xuanqing turned to look at Zhongxian, wanting to know how he managed to do it. "Close your eyes and don't resist me." Zhongxian interrupted Luo Xuanqing's words with wave of his hand. Then, he flicked his finger, and countless needles flew over. Tzzzzzzzzzz. As soon as the silver needles pierced into his body, Luo Xuanqing immediately felt a unique energy coursing through his body. The meridians that had ended up getting blocked as a result of him activating his bloodline ability slowly opened up once more. To make an analogy, activating one's bloodline ability was like causing a machine to go on overdrive. Once it cooled down, the energy that had gotten into narrow meridians would slowly agglutinate, causing blockages in the area, making it difficult for one to drive one's zhenqi through them. In other words, what was blocking the meridians was not impurities but one's own zhenqi. However, the energy that flowed through the silver needle melted the agglutinated zhenqi as if ice in the face of boiling water, clearing those meridians swiftly. In just moments, Luo Xuanqing felt refreshed and energized, and strength swiftly returned to his body, surging through his entirety. This. Yuan Xiao and the others glanced at one another, flabbergasted. Recovering one's vitality through drinking wine could still be rationalized by the wine being concocted using potent recovery medicinal herbs, but to replenish one's zhenqi just by sticking a few silver needles in, that was a little too exaggerated. Having recovered his zhenqi, Luo Xuanqing no longer felt as withered before. He flicked his wrist, took out a pill, and threw it into his mouth. Jeji. Jeji. As he absorbed the energy harnessed within the pill, the energy in his body grew stronger and stronger. In less than an hour, he had already returned to his peak state. You are really able to resolve the side effects from activating one's bloodline ability. Getting to his feet and feeling the strength coursing through his body, Luo Xuanqing stared at the young man before him with a look of disbelief. Ever since he was young, his clan elders had always warned him against activating his bloodline ability easily, or else he would have to undergo a long period of recuperation. Who knew that the formation master he had coincidentally met would actually be able to resolve his problems so easily? This is a secret art of mine, and it depletes my energy greatly as well, so I earnestly request for you all not to let this matter out, Zhongxian said with a pale face as he clasped his fist. Luo Xuanqing's cultivation was simply too much higher than his. He had needed to expend nearly all of his zhenqi before he was able to heal the other party. It would be best for him to avoid doing this in the future, or else he would probably die of overexertion after treating a couple of people. Yuan, it was apparent that Zhongxian had also pushed himself a little too much in the recovery process, and the others also understood the significance of this matter. Thus, they swiftly nodded in agreement. After a short moment of rest, Zhongxian said, "Since Brother Luo has already recovered fully, let's push for a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan right now then." "All right." Luo Xuanqing nodded. Then, with a slightly lost look on his face, he asked, "What should I do now?" Even though he had managed to recover to his full strength, he was still some way off from pushing for a breakthrough to the dimension-sundering realm. Otherwise, he would not have gone through the trouble of looking for the Dongshu gourd either. "You should assimilate this item first." Zhongxian flicked his wrist and passed a vine over. Although the power of dimension sundering within the vine was slightly inferior to that of the Dongshu gourd, it was apparent that assimilating it would do one much good in pushing for a breakthrough to the dimension sundering realm. It was due this vine that he dared promise Luo Xuanqing that he would help him achieve a breakthrough. "All right." Nodding, Luo Xuanqing began pumping his zhenqi into the vine, attempting to assimilate it for his own. This was only a small segment of the entire vine, so it was not too difficult to assimilate it. It took him less than 6 hours to succeed. Within the period of time Luo Xuanqing spent assimilating the vine, Zhongxian had managed to recover fully as well. "All right, store it in your dantian," Zhongxian instructed. Seeing how slow Luo Xuanqing's movement was, he tapped his finger forward. "Tz la." The vine immediately dived right into Luo Xuanqing's dantian. "This." Luo Xuanqing widened his eyes in disbelief. In his view, the vine was only an ordinary item. Even if he were to assimilate it, there would be nothing that would come out of it. However, when he fused it into his dantian, he realized that the vine actually harnessed countless folded spaces packed together. In fact, it could be said that the effect of the vine was nearly no different from assimilating the Dongshu gourd itself. Seeing that Luo Xuanqing finally understood, Zhongxian casually said, "All right, you can push for a breakthrough now." It was only with the eye of insight that he could discern the power of dimension sundering that was harnessed within the vine. The others lacked the ability to do so, so naturally, they were not able to notice it. "All right." With his body back to its peak state and having assimilated the vine, Luo Xuanqing knew that it was the ideal opportunity for him to achieve a breakthrough. Thus, he took a seat on the ground and began conditioning his breathing, preparing himself for a breakthrough. Some time later, with a resounding explosion, a powerful aura flowed forth from his body. His aura abruptly surged, and in just a few moments, he had already overcome his bottleneck. However, as he advanced into the half-dimension sundering realm, his cultivation gradually came to a halt. Seeing as Luo Xuanqing's flow of energy gradually came to a halt, Zhongxian asked doubtfully, "What's wrong? Are you lacking the strength to push for a breakthrough straight to Saint 8 Dan?" Under normal circumstances, considering that Luo Xuanqing was in his peak state and that he had assimilated the vine, he should have been able to push for a breakthrough to dimension sundering realm with ease. Why did he stop at just half-dimension sundering realm? "As long as I wish to do so, I can push for a breakthrough at any moment. However, at Saint 8 Dan, one's dominion will become imbued with the power of dimension sundering, which is equivalent to wresting power from the surrounding space. However, the space in this folded space is considerably weaker and less stable, so even if I do achieve a breakthrough here, the increase in my fighting prowess will not be as great," Luo Xuanqing explained. "I see." Zhongxian nodded in realization. Even though he had already comprehended the third Dan of the heavenly art of dimension unravel, he still knew close to nothing about the dimension sundering realm. As such, he was unable to anticipate such a possible pitfall. At the dimension sundering realm, cultivators would seek to sunder the space from the world to strengthen themselves, and naturally, the space sundered from folded spaces would inevitably be weaker than those sundered straight from the natural world. The space of the natural world had come to achieve an exquisite balance over countless years of development, so achieving a breakthrough there would be much more beneficial to one in terms of increment in fighting prowess or future potential. More importantly, when a cultivator achieves a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan, a lightning tribulation will be drawn in. If I challenge the trial back at the Sanctum of Sages, I'll be less susceptible to the offense of inner demons, making it easier for me to succeed. Zhongxian nodded in agreement. The Sanctum of Sages carried the aura left behind by Kong Shi and generations of master teachers, and due to the righteous air that lingered in the area, inner demons dared not wreak havoc when one was challenging a tribulation. As such, achieving a breakthrough in the Sanctum of Sages would be much easier than doing so outside. After all, not everyone was like him, capable of talking an inner demon into submission. He really succeeded. How did he manage to do it? Seeing how Luo Shenqing, who had difficulty even standing up not too long ago due to the side effects from activating his bloodline ability, successfully made a breakthrough to half-dimension Sundering Realm, the faces of Bai Hongyan and the others flushed red in agitation. Even though they had not reached Phantasm Space Realm Pinnacle yet, as long as they were to cultivate hard, they should be able to reach it within a few years. If they could engage Zhongshi's help then and push for a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan Dimension Sundering Realm, their clans would surely view them with far greater regard and grant them greater authority. Brother Luo, how much has your strength grown after achieving a breakthrough to the half-dimension Sundering Realm? Yun Lianhai asked curiously. How much has my strength grown? Hearing that question, Luo Shenqing laughed heartily and grabbed the space in front of him. Catcher. He tore off a fragment of space, creating a rift ahead of him. Everyone widened their eyes in shock. Even though they were in a folded space and Luo Shenqing had always possessed exceptional control over space, this was still an astounding feat. Even Dimension Sundering Realm intermediate stage experts would have incredible trouble achieving such a feat. There's no need to worry. There's no problem in the breakthrough method that Zhongshi has imparted to me. If I meet with that bastard Zhong Chun again, I'll be able to beat him up to the point where even his own father won't be able to recognize him, Luo Shenqing said in excitement. He had been competing with Zhong Chun for many years, and each time he achieved a breakthrough, the latter would swiftly follow suit as well. Neither of them was able to shake the other off. It was for this reason that he was determined to find the Dongshu Gourd so as to surpass the latter once and for all. Who would have thought that, even though the Dongshu Gourd did not recognize him, he would still be able to successfully make a breakthrough? With his newfound strength, he would make sure to put that fellow through a round of suffering when he returned to the Sanctum of Sages. That's a relief. Everyone first heaved a sigh of relief before they slowly directed heated gazes toward Zhongxian. Ah! Facing everyone's passionate gazes, Zhongxian scratched his head in embarrassment and said, "Since we have resolved the matter concerning the Dongshu Gourd, shall we return to the Sanctum of Sages now?" "Wait a moment first," Luo Shenqing said with a smile. "I don't think that there's only the Dongshu Gourd in this ancient domain. In fact, the reason I invited Yun Lianhai over is to borrow his ability to scan the surroundings. Perhaps, we might be able to find much more valuable treasures in here." Chapter 1363 Looped Space. A spirit vein was torn out of the mountain valley and placed into this folded space in order to supply it with energy. Surely the person who had left behind this folded space would not have conducted this huge operation just to nourish a mere Dongshu Gourd, right? There had to be something more to it. At this moment, Zhongxian also came to the same conclusion. He shot a glance at Bai Hongyan and the others and noticed the lack of surprise on their faces. From the look of it, it seemed like they had known this in advance as well, which was also the reason they were willing to lend their strength to help Luo Shenqing obtain the Dongshu Gourd despite the danger involved. "Yun Lianhai, we'll be counting on you," Luo Shenqing said with a solemn nod. "Yuan, leave it to me," Yun Lianhai replied. Without any hesitation, he executed his secret art once more, and a series of ripples diffused from his glabella into the surroundings. The folded space expanded far beyond the spatial seal where they had previously been. The ripples diffused for a very long time, to the point where Yun Lianhai's body was beginning to tremble, before they finally came to a halt. "How is it?" Yun Lianhai had to gasp for air for quite a while before he managed to recover enough to reply. "I have sensed some ancient objects, but I'm not too sure if they are treasures." "Lead the way." Luo Shenqing said. As soon as the order was given, Yun Lianhai began making his way forward. After a roughly 10 minutes journey, the crowd suddenly came to a halt with perplexed frowns on their faces. Judging from the river in the sky, it doesn't seem like we are getting anywhere. Could we possibly be trapped within a confinement formation? Bai Hongyin asked with a slightly perturbed voice. Throughout their journey, she could not help but realize that no matter where they traveled to, the river of spiritual energy still appeared to be at the exact same relative position to them in the sky. It was almost as if they had not advanced a single step forward. Facing such a situation, Luo Shenqing lowered his head and pondered for a moment before saying, "It isn't a confinement formation but the effects of the distortion in space." Achieving a breakthrough to half-dimension Sundering Realm had granted him a deeper understanding of space, allowing him to swiftly notice what was amiss with the surroundings. Distortion in space? Bai Hongyin asked doubtfully. The scenery around them appeared to completely normal, devoid of the bizarre warps similar to the cone-shaped vortex they had seen prior to entering this folded space. As such, she could not help but harbor some doubts toward Luo Xuanqing's judgment. The distortion in space here spans across the entire folded space, so it isn't visible to the eye. The space that we commonly see is three-dimensional in nature, and it stretches endlessly into the surroundings. On the other hand, the space within this folded space seems to take the form of a ring. Traveling in a straight line will result in us walking in a loop, bringing us back to the point that we started from, Luo Shenqing explained. On top of that, a distortion in space will cause light to distort as well, and this creates the illusion that we are walking in a straight line even though we are effectively walking in circles. If we could jump out of this folded space and look at ourselves from above, we should see that our bodies are distorted instead of upright. Hearing those words, Zhongxian nodded in agreement. Distorted spaces were not apparent to those who were standing within them. In a sense, this was similar to how it was not apparent to an individual that the Earth was round just by looking at their immediate surroundings. The situation they were currently facing was similar to two endpoints in space connecting with one another, forming a closed loop that resulted in them walking in endless circles. If that's the case, how do we leave this folded space? Yuan Xiao asked apprehensively. Luo Shenqing hesitated for a moment before replying, "Shatter the folded space." Hearing that, Bai Hongyin shook her head and said, "Folded spaces aren't stable. If anything goes wrong while shattering the folded space, there's a good chance that we might be trapped here for life." Folded spaces were not as stable as spaces in the natural world, and they were incapable of regenerating on their own. So, if someone exerted too much strength, it could result in its complete collapse, and all of them would be reduced to dust. It was also for this reason that it would be unsafe for them to bring the Saint 8 Dan Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast in. This. Luo Shenqing frowned. He also understood this much, or else he would have made a move immediately instead of wasting his breath on words. Zhongxian suddenly spoke up. "Actually, there's no need to shatter this space." "Oh." The crowd quickly turned their sights over. "Look at the flow of the spiritual energy above us. No matter where we walk, it remains right above us. This only means that the space around the river is stable, or in other words, it isn't within the folded space we are in," Zhongxian explained. Looks of realization dawned upon the crowd. Indeed, if the river was within the looped folded space as well, its relative position to them should change along with their movement. It did not make sense for it to remain fixed in position. If we wish to escape from here, we just have to find a way to delve into the river and move against its current, Zhongxian said. "That's right." Luo Xuanqing's eyes lit up upon hearing those words, and he quickly nodded in agreement as well. "Since that's the case, let's make a move." Without any hesitation, the crowd immediately flew toward the river. The river was actually a spirit vein. As soon as the crowd made their way into it, they felt overwhelming spiritual energy pouring toward them at an incredible speed, causing their breathing to hasten. Luo Shenqing waved his hand and formed a massive spatial bubble around the crowd, alleviating the pressure resulting from the strong currents in the river. With that, the discomfort was reduced significantly, and they began to make their way forward slowly. This spirit vein could have been passed off as pinnacle spirit stones, but it has expended itself too much in order to sustain this space. What a pity, Zhongxian thought in lamentation. If this massive spirit vein had still been in the mountain valley, it surely would have developed into a spirit mine filled with plenty of pinnacle spirit stones. However, in order to allow the space to remain operating normally, the spiritual energy within it had been slowly depleting, to the point where even producing high-tier spirit stones was a problem for it now. But again, if this spirit vein had actually produced pinnacle spirit stones, it would have long been harvested by the other powers. There was no way they would have gotten a chance to obtain the Dongshu gourd. Right. I should try and see if I can communicate with that fellow. Knowing that he would not be in any danger with Luo Shenqing around, Zhongxian turned his consciousness into his body, toward his dantian. He swiftly saw the fellow who had willfully dived into his body lying leisurely on the ground, exuding vibes similar to a lazy Sunday morning. Seeing how the gourd was able to remain completely unfazed after all the trouble it had caused him, displeasure swiftly filled Zhongxian's mind. Since that fellow has absorbed my blood and acknowledged me, I should be considered as its master now. Thus, he began trying to establish control over the Dongshu gourd. Tzzzzzz. Under the drive of his power, the Dongshu gourd began revolving in the air. The power of space contained within the Dongshu gourd began flowing through his body. Voila! Wherever the power of space swept by, the heaven's path Zhenqi in the area of his dantian would suddenly collapse inward, as if it had fallen into a depression. What's going on? Zhongxian narrowed his eyes in alarm. He had spent a great deal of effort to recover his Zhenqi, so how could the Dongshu gourd make it disappear just by emanating a bit of power? No, that's not it. It's not that my Zhenqi has disappeared, the space within my dantian has been changed. I can store much more Zhenqi in here now. After a swift scan, Zhongxian was stunned. It was not that his Zhenqi had vanished into thin air, the surrounding space had been distorted, allowing him to store much more Zhenqi had before. Wait a moment. A thought suddenly emerged in Zhongxian's mind. If I could set up a closed loop within my dantian as well and keep my Zhenqi in perpetual revolution, not only will I be able to store more Zhenqi, I'll be able to draw it swifter than before as well, granting me more explosive power. As perplexing as the idea of a looped space might have sounded to one who was encountering it for the first time, it was actually a rather simple concept, and it was not too difficult for him to implement. If I could exert all of my Zhenqi in an instant, I might just be able to execute the Ocean Cataclysm sword. With that thought, Zhongxian's eyes lit up. Even though the Ocean Cataclysm sword still had a few flaws here and there, the main reason he could not execute it yet was mainly due to his output of Zhenqi being too low. No matter how huge a tank was, the amount of water it could pump out was still limited by the width of its pipes. The Ocean Cataclysm sword required far greater outburst of Zhenqi compared to the sea-severing sword, but if he could set up such a looped space within his dantian, he might just be able to draw forth sufficient Zhenqi instantaneously to execute the technique. Let me give a try. Tzzzzzz. Sensing his strength, the Dongshu gourd began to revolve slowly, gradually releasing the power of space around Zhongxian's dantian. It was a little similar to a bee constructing its beehive. It seems like it'll take a while before the construction is complete. Owing to the limitations in his cultivation, Zhongxian knew that it would take him a lot of effort to construct a looped space within his dantian even with the help of the Dongshu gourd. Nevertheless, it was a relief to see that he was able to drive the Dongshu gourd without it resisting him. This meant that he had really managed to assimilate the latter. Watching the construction of the folded space in his dantian, Zhongxian sighed helplessly. It'll be fine as long as it doesn't cause any trouble. Just that, I'll need quite a bit of spiritual energy to complete the construction, so I need to start looking for spirit stones once more. Due to his cultivation of the Saint Ascension Decipher, his Zhenqi capacity far exceeded that of an ordinary cultivator. However, with the setting up of a looped space, he would require a lot more Zhenqi in order to fill it up. Making a rough calculation, he would require 10 times as much as what he had at the moment. This meant that he would have to gather spirit stones, absorb the spiritual energy within them, convert that into Zhenqi, and deposit it into his looped space. But given how poor he was at the moment, where was he supposed to look for more spirit stones? If it really comes down to it, Perhaps I should get Sun Qiong to compile a list of cultivators who are on the verge of a breakthrough in the Sanctum of Sages and share their lightning tribulation when it comes, Zhongxian contemplated seriously. He had benefited greatly from absorbing energy from the lightning tribulation during his previous breakthrough to leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle. Since he was able to do that for his lightning tribulation, there should not be any reason he could not do the same for the other lightning tribulations. With that, he should be able to fill up his dantian easily without any trouble. I should have a discussion with Brother Luo later on and request to observe his lightning tribulation. Zhongxian nodded as he made up his mind on the matter. After the previous absorption, the energy harnessed within ordinary lightning tribulations would not have much use to him anymore. However, the lightning tribulation that Luo Shenqing would have to face when he pushed for a breakthrough to the dimension-sundering realm should be able to meet his standards. Look, what's that? While Zhongxian was deep in thought, a sudden exclamation from the group pulled him back to reality. Raising his head to take a look, he realized that they had already reached the end of the river flow. A mountain range filled with peaks that rose right above the clouds appeared before his eyes. However, on second look, he realized that the mountain was not real. It felt fleeting and beyond reach, a little like a painting someone had hung at the horizon of the world, or perhaps just a mere mirage, a product of one's imagination. That's the highest level of painting, world composition, Luo Shenqing remarked grimly. World composition? A painting at the level of world composition far exceeds the realm evocative vividness, reaching a level where even humans can enter and live within the painting, Luo Shenqing said. Hearing those words, Zhongxian nodded. He took a closer look at the painting, and suddenly, a feeling of déjà vu came to him. He racked his brain in an attempt to capture the source of this feeling of familiarity when his eyes narrowed in astonishment. This mountain range. Isn't it the same as the one in the painting that the Qingtian Emperor made me decipher? Chapter 1364. You again. Back in the Qingyuan Empire, the Qingtian Emperor visited the Painter Guild with a copper mask in hand, seeking help to remove the seal on a painting he had. In the end, Zhongxian was the one who managed to remove the seal, and beneath it, he found an illusory image of Kongsha. And for him to see a higher-level painting that depicted the identical mountain range to the one he had seen before. Could they be depicting the same location? Kongsha's image isn't on the painting though. Did the painter intentionally choose not to draw it, or did he not notice Kongsha's presence? Zhongxian frowned. Flicking his wrist, Zhongxian took out the painting he had acquired from the Qingtian Emperor and compared it to the mountain range on the 9th level painting before him. The features were completely identical to one another, well, with the exception of the Lake of Bathing Ladies. That's the White Creek Mountain of the Empire Alliance. It's located at a place very far away from the Sanctum of Sages, such that even a Saint Seven Dan beast would require a flight of 3 months in order to reach there. Taking a glance at the painting in Zhongxian's hand, Luo Shenqing said. He was slightly surprised initially to see that Zhongxian had a painting of the same scenery as the 9th level painting before them, but he didn't think too much into it. After all, due to the splendid scenery at the White Creek Mountain, there were quite a few paintings of it circulating out there in the world. White Creek Mountain. Zhongxian muttered beneath his breath as he tightened his fists. While the painting you have can't compete with the 9th level painting up there, it's still a commendable work of art. It has managed to bring out the splendor and beauty of the mountain range in full. Luo Shenqing complimented. This was a painting that could astound all painters in the Qingyuan Empire, but to Luo Xuanqing's eyes, it could only be considered to be commendable. Indeed. Zhongxian replied perfunctorily as he kept the painting back to his storage ring with his mind wandering somewhere else. Now that he knew that the mountain range depicted in the painting was the White Creek Mountain, he would have to make a trip over there to take a look. Since Kongsha's apparition was spotted there was a good chance that he might find Kongsha's ancient domain over there too. While the two of them were chatting, the spatial bubble rose up from the river and arrived before the massive 9th level painting. Are we able to enter this painting too? Looking at the lifelike painting before him, Zhongxian asked in curiosity. There was bound to be a reason as to why the elder who had left the Dongshu Gourd here would leave a 9th level painting here as well. If they could enter the painting, They might just be able to unravel the secrets behind this folded space. It should be possible. Luo Xianqing pondered for a moment before nodding. I'll head in to take a look then, Zhong Xian said with a smile before heading in. This painting was not drawn on a paper but on top of the folded space. It consisted of multiple layers stitched together by the fabric of space, so Zhong Xian had to fly for quite some time before he finally arrived before the massive mountain range. The sheer expanse the mountain range took granted it an imposing and grand aura. Flying upward, Zhong Xian soon arrived at where he had replaced Kong Shi's image with the bathing ladies, and he swiftly scanned the area. A moment later, he shook his head in disappointment. There was nothing special to be seen here. There was no apparition of Kong Shi or any hidden folded spaces and the such. Nevertheless, there should still be some reason why the elder chose to leave this 9th-level painting in here. Zhong Xian mumbled contemplatively beneath his breath. If this ancient domain was really left behind by ancient sage Qiu Wu, everything would make perfect sense. He was Kong Shi's servant, and the reason why he left behind this painting was likely to remind future generations that there was something lying in the White Creek Mountain. Zhong Xian continued scanning through the mountain range, but he was unable to find anything or note. Eventually, he could only return with empty hands. When he finally returned back to Luo Xianqing and the other's side, the mountain range suddenly shuddered slightly before dissipating silently. This painting has been around for too long. It's likely that time had already left it tattered throughout, and the only reason why it's still able to maintain its original appearance is likely only because no one has touched it yet. Your act of entering the painting had placed too much stress on the painting, thus inevitably resulting in its dissipation. Luo Xianqing explained. The slightly stunned Zhong Xian nodded in realization. In a sense, this was similar to how even if old possessions were able to retain their beautiful outer appearances, their worn-out within would only cause them to crumble to dust upon touch. Zhong Xian took one last glance at the dissipated painting before turning his gaze back forward. A rather wide passageway had appeared before them. Following behind Luo Xianqing and the others' footsteps, he landed on top of the passageway. After all of the spatial distortion he had been through, it felt reassuring to have his feet planted onto solid ground. The artifact that I sensed is in there, Yun Lianhai said with eyes gleaming with excitement. As soon as he stepped onto the passageway, the fuzzy feeling he had received from the treasure before suddenly turned extremely distinct. As long as they were to walk down this path, they should be able to find quite a few good stuff. Great! Hearing that the treasure was located not too far away from them, the crowd immediately felt energized, and they began making their way forward. Before long, a palace unfolded before their eyes. While it was called a palace, it wasn't too big or extravagant. Instead, its ancient design seemed to be communicating the long history behind it. It's likely that there might be danger in here. Let me head in to take a look first, Luo Xianqing said before taking the lead forward. The gates of the palace were carved from stone, and it was densely filled with inscriptions. These are spatial inscriptions, unique characters which ancient sage Qiu Wu has created. Through studying these characters, one could comprehend the essence of space. Our clan has a detailed interpretation of these words, Luo Xianqing exclaimed in astonishment. Spatial inscriptions? Zhong Xian looked at those characters contemplatively for a moment before nodding. He had seen those words at the Qiu Wu Palace as well. The heavenly demon Great Sorrow Palm was written using these words. Back then, he had no idea what those words meant, but he still managed to learn the battle technique through emulating the form of those words. If that's the case, does that mean that the ancient domain is really left behind by ancient sage Qiu Wu? Bai Hongyan asked in agitation. Even though ancient sage Qiu Wu was Kong Shi's servant, his true strength was no weaker than the founder of the Sanctum of Sages, ancient sage Bo Shong. More importantly, his comprehension of space had reached an extremely high level. If they could obtain his heritage, it would only be a matter of time before they achieved a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan or even Saint 9 Dan. That's most likely to be the case. But it's a little weird though. My clan has a huge collection of books detailing the life of ancient sage Qiu Wu, but we have never heard that he has left behind such an ancient domain before, Luo Xianqing said with a bewildered frown. As complicated as this ancient domain appears to be, to experts of the caliber of an ancient sage, it's something that they can create on a whim. I think it's likely that not even ancient sage Qiu Wu remembered about this ancient domain he had left behind. Yun Lianhai said. Coming from a clan of treasure hunters, he had come into contact with simply too many treasures in the world. There were many ancient domains which appeared to be mystifyingly profound to those of the later generations, and the treasures within them were incredibly valuable too. However, to those who had left them behind, those might not bear much significance at all. The difference in realms inevitably led to a huge difference in how they assessed the value of things. That's true. Zhongxian nodded in agreement. Take him for example, he wouldn't even blink an eye if someone were to throw 1,000,000 high-tier spirit stones before him. However, in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, just the possession of a single high-tier spirit stone could already be considered as a great wealth. Similarly, while the Dongshu gourd might seem to be incomparably valuable to them, it might just be something that an ancient sage would just toss away casually. Luo Xianqing, since you recognize those characters, what is written on there? Yun Lianhai asked. It's a message intended for the later generations who discover this ancient domain. The general meaning is that those who are able to come this far are bound to have a deep understanding of space and are qualified to obtain his heritage. The way to open the door is also detailed on it. Luo Xianqing said as he examined the inscriptions on the wall closely. After many years of studying these spatial inscriptions, the Luo clan had already compiled a book that allowed others to interpret the meaning behind these characters. Heritage. Does this meant to say that the heritage of ancient sage Qiu Wu lies in the palace? That seems so. Luo Xianqing nodded. Taking a deep breath, he said, I'm going to open the door now, so be careful. It isn't easy for us to come to this point, so nothing must go wrong at this moment. After saying those words, he took a step backward before he raised his hand and tapped his finger forward. A surge of zhenqi poured forth and struck the gates. He sent out a total of 3 such surges of zhenqi in a formation, and energy began rippling across the surface of the gates. Jiyaya, it began to slowly open. Luo Xianqing immediately drove his zhenqi to create a protective barrier around him in preparation for what would appear. Ancient sage Qiu Wu was a respected and celebrated figure, but since he had left his heritage behind here, he must have set up all kinds of trials in order to assess the qualification of those who sought his heritage. It would be better for them to proceed carefully. Luo Xianqing stepped into the palace, and sometime later, he waved his hand to beckon for the others and said, "There's no danger. Come in." The crowd quickly swarmed in and found themselves standing within a hall. It was completely empty, except for a sculpture erected not too far away. It's ancient sage Qiu Wu. Upon seeing the face on the sculpture, Zhongxian exclaimed. He had seen ancient sage Qiu Wu back in the Qiu Wu palace, so naturally, he could recognize the sculpture here too. This is ancient sage Qiu Wu? Despite coming from illustrious backgrounds, this was the first time they were seeing ancient sage Qiu Wu's sculpture. I have seen before ancient sage Qiu Wu's painting, that's indeed him. Luo Xianqing replied before directing a perplexed glance at Zhongxian. Zhongshe, how did you know it's him? Ancient sage Qiu Wu had maintained a low profile in his lifetime, so there weren't too many records on him. The Luo clan was only able to recognize the other party through a painting they had in their possession, so how was the young man before him able to recognize it with a look? You said earlier that those words were left behind by ancient sage Qiu Wu, so I thought that the sculpture must be him as well. Zhongxian replied sheepishly. The Qiu Wu palace carried the secret of the heavenly art of dimension unravel, so it was best for him to avoid talking about it for the time being. On the other hand, seeing that Zhongxian was unwilling to speak about the matter, Luo Xianqing also didn't push him for a response either. Everyone had their own private encounters and secrets, and there was no purpose in insistently dredging them up. Instead, he walked over to the sculpture, kneeled onto the ground, and respectfully kowtowed a few times before standing up once more. Our Luo clan's understanding of spatial laws originated from ancient sage Qiu Wu's heritage, so our ancestor has made a rule that if any member of the Luo clan were to encounter ancient sage Qiu Wu's sculpture or will, we must kowtow to him to honor him as our grand teacher. Luo Xianqing explained. The Luo clan's understanding of spatial laws originated from ancient sage Qiu Wu's heritage? Zhongxian was astonished. He turned to look at Yuan Xiao and the others, but they seemed to already be aware of this matter. Space is an intrinsic nature of the world, so unlike swordsmanship and the others, which can be developed into many different quintessences, it has only one true path. As such, their heritages are more unified. Zhongxian came to a realization. He should have known this earlier. It was no wonder why the annal of bedstead disquisition sage Luo had left behind was able to perfect the heavenly art of dimension unravel. It turned out that the both of them had originated from the same source. Junior Luo Shenqing pays respect to ancient sage Qiu Wu. After saying those words, Luo Shenqing reached out his hand and placed it on the lower pedestal of the sculpture. Wang. A light buzz echoed in the air for a moment before brilliant light burst forth from the sculpture. The unmoving sculpture slowly opened its eyes. The will of ancient sage Qiu Wu. Bai Hongyin, Yuan Xiao, and the others widened their eyes in shock, and without any hesitation, they kneeled to the ground. One must know that ancient sage Qiu Wu was an expert which was even older than the founder of their respective heritages, such that even those founders would have to kneel down and address him as senior. Back then, while I was passing by here, I happened to chance upon the seed of the Dongshu gourd, so I decided to plant it, hoping that it would be of some help to the later generations. The fact that you are able to come this far shows that you have achieved a deep comprehension of space and is qualified to obtain my heritage. The sculpture began speaking. Thank you, ancient sage Qiu Wu. Everyone felt agitated to receive ancient sage Qiu Wu's recognition. Luo Shenqing was just about to utter some words of gratitude when he suddenly realized that not too far away, Zhongxian was still standing. A frown emerged on his forehead as he berated, "Zhongshe, why are you not paying your respects to ancient sage Qiu Wu?" But barely after those words were spoken, ancient sage Qiu Wu's sculpture had also turned his head over, and a horrified look appeared on his face. "You again." Chapter 1365 Collapse of the Ancient Domain. You recognize me? Zhongxian was taken aback. You made me come to see the flaws in my cultivation, so you can be considered half a teacher to me. How could I not recognize you? The sculpture replied. Flaws in ancient sage Qiu Wu's cultivation? Half a teacher? Does this mean that Zhongshe has actually offered pointers to ancient sage Qiu Wu? The teeth of Luo Shenqing, Bai Hongyin, and the others clattered from shock upon hearing those words. The significance of this matter was truly big, to the point that knowing too much might even cost them their lives. But, aren't you a fragmented soul? Zhongxian asked in intrigue. Even though they had met once another in the Qiu Wu palace, each fragmented soul should have been an independent existence. Normally, it should have been impossible for any of ancient sage Qiu Wu's fragmented souls outside of the Qiu Wu palace to share memories with those within, so how did the one before him recognize him? Each fragmented soul is an independent existence, but the order in which they are created is significant, too. It'll be nigh impossible for fragmented souls that are created earlier to read into the memories of those who are created later, but as for fragmented souls that are created later, through some special means, it isn't too difficult for them to share the memories of those that were created earlier. Not to mention, you are even carrying my heritage along with you, so it's even easier for me to do so, the sculpture explained. Zhongxian nodded in realization. He had been carrying the Qiu Wu palace with him wherever he went, and while it was currently stored in his storage ring, considering ancient sage Qiu Wu's unfathomable mastery over space, it was not too difficult for him to figure out what had happened within. It's no wonder you tamed the Dongshu gourd and got here so quickly. Your presence here explains everything. Ahem, I still have some things to attend to, so goodbye. With a sudden catch-up, a crack ran through the sculpture. Following which, the imposing aura that was compelling subservience in the crowd receded like an ebbing tide. Boom. Following which, the sculpture abruptly exploded into countless fragments amid a cloud of dust, and it took a long while before everything settled on the ground. This ancient sage Qiu Wu's will has dissipated. But he hasn't told us what the heritage is yet. With twitching eyebrows, Luo Shenqing and the others clawed at their hair, unable to believe the situation unfolding right before them. They had traveled far to get there, and after a great deal of hard work, they had finally been just a step away from obtaining the heritage when the sculpture abruptly exploded before their eyes, and the will harnessed within it dissipated. What the heck was this? They slowly turned toward Zhongxian and said, "Zhongshe." Facing the glares of the crowd, Zhongxian was completely dumbfounded as well. Was that ancient sage Qiu Wu not a little too unreliable? He had also dissipated the previous time before saying what the heritage was. In fact, this time around, he had barely said anything at all. He had seen so many wills, but in terms of speed, that fellow was surely the first. It was no wonder he could come up with battle techniques such as the unbounded voyager. It turned out to be completely aligned with his innate nature, but thinking of it again, Kong Shi was rather fast as well. They had met 2 times so far, but each time, he did not manage to get the solution for the innate fetal poison out of him. This master and servant pair. No wonder the two of them managed to click with one another. Under the murderous glares that were intensifying by the moment, Zhongxian replied with twitching lips, "Ahem, maybe this is a test posed to us by ancient sage Qiu Wu? He might have hidden the heritage somewhere in this folded space and want us to find it ourselves." That had been the case in the Qiu Wu palace too. After ancient sage Qiu Wu's will dissipated, he had managed to find the heavenly art of dimension unravel through studying the 3 words Qiu Wu palace at the entrance. Considering that it was the same ancient sage Qiu Wu they were talking about, he was likely to go by the same pattern. Hearing those words, the crowd traded doubtful gazes, seemingly trying to ascertain the likelihood of Zhongxian's words being true. Luo Xianqing pondered for a moment before saying, "Back then, before our old ancestor obtained ancient sage Qiu Wu's heritage and comprehended the spatial laws, he also seemed to have gone through a similar experience." Zhongshe is right. A person like ancient sage Qiu Wu would only pass down his heritage to those who have undergone his careful selection. It wouldn't make sense for him to give his all to someone he has only met once. Let's comb through the area. We might just be able to find something. Seeing that Luo Xianqing had covered up for him, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. Bai Hongyin and the others nodded before getting to their feet to search the area. The walls of the palace were also made of some kind of mysterious stone, and just like the gates, there were characters inscribed on them as well. Bai Hongyin and the others could not interpret those characters, so they could only turn to Luo Xianqing for help. These characters aren't a cultivation technique but just inscriptions to fortify the defenses of the palace. Even though this is a folded space, thus, there are no storms to weather, this fortification played a crucial role in allowing the palace to remain standing even after the passing of many millenniums, Luo Xianqing explained. Regardless of weather conditions, all structures would still eventually wear down with time. Without the fortification inscriptions, the palace would have long collapsed from the accrued damage. Seeing that these characters meant nothing at all, the crowd was a little disappointed. At this point, Bai Hongyin suddenly thought of something and turned to Yun Lianhai. The heritage should also be considered a treasure, too. Yun Lianhai, do you sense anything in the area? Since Yun Lianhai had been able to lead them there was a chance he would be able to lead them to the heritage left behind by ancient sage Qiu Wu as well. I'll give it a try. Yun Lianhai nodded before activating his unique ability. This ability of his could only be considered to be tapping into his bloodline rather than activating it, so while it would cause some damage to him, it was not to the point where he would be incapacitated for an entire month. Opening the third eye in between his eyebrows, he swept the area swiftly before suddenly coming to a halt. I sense something weird in that direction. He pointed in a direction as he said those words. The crowd quickly turned their gazes over. It was directed toward the area just beneath the sculpture. Rummaging through the shattered stone fragments, they soon found traces of a folded space. Wonderful! The eyes of the crowd lit up, and Luo Xianqing raised his finger and tapped on the folded space. Wang! With a brilliant burst of light, a line of words surged out of the folded space and appeared before the crowd. Heavenly Demon Great Sorrow Fis. Zhongxian read out. He had thought that ancient sage Qiu Wu had just said those words on a whim, but who would have thought that he had really left his heritage behind? Legend has it that ancient sage Qiu Wu's strongest battle techniques involve his finger, sword, fist, and palm, and they carry the prefix Heavenly Demon Great Sorrow. The palm art is at Saint Intermediate tier, the fist art is at Saint High tier, and the sword art is at Saint Pinnacle. Even the old ancestor of my Luo clan was unable to find those battle techniques, but to think that we would actually stumble on one of them here. Luo Shenqing was so agitated that his eyes were glowing. Finger, sword, fist, and palm? Zhongxian was taken aback. He had learned the Heavenly Demon Great Sorrow palm before, and it was indeed a Saint Intermediate tier battle technique. He had thought that it was just an independent battle technique, but to think that it would actually be part of an entire series. He quickly looked at the words in the sky and commanded in his mind, "Floors." Voila! A book materialized in the library of Heaven's Path. Placing his finger on it, a constipated look swiftly appeared on Zhongxian's face. There are even more flaws with it, Zhongxian thought with a shake of his head. Just the 27 flaws in the Heavenly Demon Great Sorrow palm had left him feeling deeply uncomfortable within, but this one actually had 31 flaws. To be fair, it was a decent battle technique with formidable strength, but how could he bring himself to cultivate such a flawed technique? Ever since he started cultivating the Heaven's Path divine art, he had already grown accustomed to practicing skills that were devoid of flaws. Like a germaphobe, even the slightest hint of a fault would leave him feeling deeply uncomfortable, as if bugs were crawling over his skin, and there were actually 31 of them in this manual. Zhongxian swiftly gathered all of the fist art manuals that he had practiced so far and compiled them together with it. Compile. There are still 28 flaws. Even though Zhongxian had seen quite a number of fist art manuals in the past, their tier was simply too low. They were still sorely lacking to complement the faults found in a Saint High tier fist art. Several 100,000 books, but they only managed to remove 3 flaws in total. Zhongxian shook his head and consoled himself. Forget it, I'll just have to find more fist art manuals when I return to the Sanctum of Sages to perfect the Heavenly Demon Great Sorrow fist. In any case, there were plenty of secret manuals in the Sanctum of Sages. As long as he could clear the examination for them, he should be able to gather quite a number of fist art manuals. With time, he would surely be able to perfect it. At this moment, the ground beneath their feet suddenly began trembling, and the space around them began distorting. Crap, this is bad. The dissipation of ancient sage Qiu Wu's will and the taking away of the Dongshu gourd have led to instability within the space. At this rate, it'll soon collapse, Luo Shenqing exclaimed in shock. Similar to the mountain gate of the Sanctum of Sages, the structure of this folded space was simply too complicated. Without someone to sustain its operations, it would swiftly collapse at the slightest hint of impact. And clearly, this was what was happening at the moment. Collapse. Everyone's face paled. As powerful as they were still limited by the space they were in. If the folded space were to collapse, there was a good chance that they would be crushed between dimension rifts and die, unless they could achieve a level that surpassed this folded space. But that would require them to be at Saint Nine Dan at the very minimum. We need to leave right now, or else we might just die in here. Luo Shenqing exclaimed anxiously. But I have only remembered 2 lines of the entire fist art. Bai Hongyan exclaimed with a reddened face. I have also only managed to remember 2 lines, Yuan Xiao said. There were countless cultivators who dream of obtaining ancient sage Qiu Wu's battle technique, and it was a stroke of luck that they had managed to find it. Yet, to have to leave without memorizing its entirety, they just could not get over the indignation in their hearts. Your lives are more important. No matter how powerful the battle technique is, it'll be futile if you don't have the life to practice it. I have also only managed to memorize 4 lines myself. Hurry up, let's go. Luo Shenqing urged with a wave of his hand. This battle technique had been created by ancient sage Qiu Wu, and it harnessed the essence of his wisdom. All in all, it contained more than several hundred lines, and despite their superior memory as cultivators, it would still take them at least an hour to memorize everything. Barely a minute had passed so far, and it was already a formidable feat for them to have been able to memorize 2 to 4 lines. But again, between a battle technique and their lives, it was clear which was more important. All right. Seeing that the surrounding space was shaking more and more intensely, such that dimension rift cracks had started appearing around the area, Bai Hongyan and the others realized that they could not afford to waste any more time. They quickly followed behind Luo Shenqing to dash out of the folded space. Naturally, Zhongxian followed suit. They had proceeded slowly to carefully scan the area so as to ensure that they did not miss anything important when they were walking through the passageway toward the palace earlier, but with danger right behind them, they could not afford to do that. They flitted forward desperately as if their lives were on the line, and it took merely 2 breaths before they returned to the top of the river flow. Luo Shenqing swiftly summoned a spatial bubble once more and wrapped it around the entire group before driving it forward with all his might. 10 breaths later, they returned to the bottom of the river, where they had first encountered the Dongshu gourd. Catcher! Catcher! Barely after they returned there, they saw a huge dimension rift swiftly devouring the palace and the river behind them. That was a close shave. Cold sweat trickled down the crowd's backs. It was fortunate that they did not hesitate for too long there, or else they might have died. Let's quickly get out of here, Luo Shenqing said as he used a secret art of the Luo clan to forcefully tear open an exit in the folded space. Everyone quickly leaped up and headed out. Hoo-hoo! A deafening gale whistled by their ears, and intense vertigo swallowed them, leaving them in a deeply disoriented state. Fortunately, this only lasted for a moment. When they opened their eyes once more, they were already back at the cavern. Po! Barely after they managed to find their footing once more, the sesame-sized spatial distortion suddenly emanated a blinding burst of light before vanishing from view. The ancient domain had really fully collapsed. Chapter 1366 Let me teach you, the heavenly demon Great Sorrow Fist. The disappearance of the folded space meant that the ancient domain had become nothing more than a part of history. Even though they were relieved that they had managed to survive the collapse, they still could not help but feel dismay regarding the loss of ancient sage Qiu Wu's heritage. An unparalleled battle technique was right before them, and they missed it just like that. Even though I only managed to memorize a few lines, it's still a battle technique left behind by ancient sage Qiu Wu. If I can internalize it well, I should be able to raise my fighting prowess significantly, Yuan Xiao said. Why don't we do this? Let's regurgitate the content that we memorized, put it all together, and analyze it. This way, we can at least make the best out of what we know of the heavenly demon Great Sorrow Fist. I guess that's all we can do now. Bai Hongyan and the others quickly nodded in agreement. A battle technique of the heavenly demon Great Sorrow Fist's tier was extremely difficult to comprehend. Every single line carried a deep conception and great significance. Even though they had only managed to memorize a couple of lines, if they could just study it thoroughly, they should still be able to benefit greatly from it. Luo Shenqing, you have the best memory of us all. Why don't you go first? Yuan Luo Shenqing nodded. The 4 lines that I have memorized are: as one of the top geniuses of the Luo clan, he possessed superb memory. In just a short 1 to 2 minutes, he actually managed to memorize more than 100 words. Hearing that what they had memorized was the exact same as what Luo Shenqing had said, Yuan Xiao and the others heaved a sigh of relief. Just as they were about to start analyzing what those 4 lines meant, Yun Lianhai suddenly spoke up. I think I got the 5th line. Everyone quickly turned their gazes over with their bodies trembling in agitation. You memorized the 5th line? I think so. Yun Lianhai nodded as he quickly regurgitated the 5th line. As a treasure hunter, possessing a good memory was of vital importance in order to be able to put clues together. As good as Luo Shenqing's memory was, it was still slightly lacking compared to Yun Lianhai's. Amazing. Even though it's only 5 lines, it seems to have already opened up a new world to me, Luo Shenqing remarked in awe as he ruminated over the words for a moment. At this point, a thought suddenly flashed across his mind, and he turned to the silent Zhongxian. Zhongshe, what about you? How many lines have you remembered? Me. Zhongxian had been too preoccupied lamenting over the destruction of the folded space that he had not really heard what the others were saying. He felt that if he could have gotten the myriad ant-hive queen to swallow the space, he would have been able to increase the space in the myriad ant-hive nest significantly. He was slightly startled by the abrupt question before responding. Oh, I managed to memorize everything. You memorized everything? Flabbergasted. They were all Saint 7 Dan and half Saint 8 Dan experts, possessing superior analytical abilities, but even so, they only managed to memorize 5 lines in total. But he actually memorized everything? Indeed. Zhong Xian nodded. Then, can you recite the content for us? Luo Shenqing asked in agitation. Sure. Actually, why don't I just write it down for you? This way, you can refer to it whenever you want to. With a tap of his finger, a surge of zhenqi shot forth from Zhong Xian's fingers before abruptly bursting apart in the sky, forming a massive screen of light. Slowly, words began surfacing on the light screen. It was the cultivation method for the heavenly demon Great Sorrowfist. He just had to use the Library of Heaven's Path to collect the entire manual, so it did not even take him half a breath to memorize everything. All he had to do now was bring it out word for word, so it was no trouble at all. Looking at the screen filled with words before them, everyone gulped as they shot glances of disbelief at Zhong Xian. To memorize so many words within just a minute or two. Just how in the world did he manage to do it? At this moment, Yun Lianhai suddenly exclaimed, "Wait a moment, Zhongshe. There are a few words in your manual that are different from what I memorized." Everyone turned their gazes over and saw Yun Lianhai pointing toward the third line. Indeed, there were 3 words in the third line that were different from what they had discussed and agreed on earlier. Even though it was only a difference of 3 words, this alteration gave a completely different direction and conception to the battle technique. Could it be that, even though that fellow did manage to memorize the entire manual, his memory on certain portions was flawed? If that was the case, they should not practice this version of the heavenly demon Great Sorrowfist even if it formed a complete manual. It was still fine if one failed to memorize a cultivation technique or battle technique. What was truly dangerous was if one had remembered it incorrectly. Even the slightest mistake in cultivation could possibly lead to one treading down the wrong path, possibly resulting in one's cultivation going berserk. Oh. After I was done memorizing the heavenly demon Great Sorrowfist, I had some time to examine it closely. I realized that the cultivation technique had quite a few problems, so I made some alterations to it. However, due to the limitations of my knowledge, I was only able to correct a couple of the flaws. Zhong Xian sighed, and his head reddened in embarrassment. If he had more Saint high-tier fist art manuals to refer to, he would have been able to correct more of the flaws. So far, of the 31 flaws, he had only managed to correct 3 of them, which was not even a tenth of the total. This was truly a huge failure on his part. Alterations. The crowd nearly spurted a mouthful of blood. While we were struggling to memorize 2 to 5 lines of the manual, you managed to memorize everything and even alter it. Their faces flushed red, and they felt as if they were about to explode from the sheer frustration bubbling within them. Quick at setting up formations? Fine, we'll tolerate that. Quick at deciphering poison? Alright, we'll accept that too. Quick at helping others achieving a breakthrough? Fine, we'll take that grudgingly as well. But to be able to memorize a manual that quickly and even have time to alter it? Don't you think that you are showing off a bit too much? Why don't you just give me a while first? If I can refer to the fist art manuals back at the Sanctum of Sages, I should be able to perfect it further, thus bringing its might up to a new height, Zhong Xian said. It would not be nice for him to pass down such a disgustingly flawed battle technique to others. It would be best if he could perfect it before imparting it to them. Yuan Xiao pondered for a moment before replying. It's fine. I'll just memorize the original version. I think I'll go with the original version. Zhongshe, may I trouble you to pen down the battle technique prior to your alterations? Bai Hongyan asked as well. Even their old ancestors would dare not alter a battle technique from an expert of that caliber easily. Despite the extraordinary feats that Zhong Xian had achieved so far, they were hesitant to put themselves on the line to cultivate a battle technique that he had altered. All right then. Knowing what the crowd was worried about, Zhong Xian did not insist on the matter. With a wave of his hand, he reverted the portions that he had altered to their original version. Seeing that the content had been changed to its original state, the crowd hurriedly took out some paper and brushes to copy the content down. It would be disastrous if they memorized the content incorrectly, so it would be much safer for them to copy everything down instead. An hour later, they were finally done copying the manual. Zhongshu, earlier, ancient sage Qiu Wu said that he knows you. Have the both of you met one another before? Luo Shenqing asked curiously. I happened to stumble into one of his ancient domain once, and after clearing his tests, I obtained his heavenly demon Great Sorrow Palm, Zhongshen said without going into detail or revealing the existence of the Qiu Wu Palace. I see. The crowd nodded in realization. Then, what about when ancient sage Qiu Wu talked about you seeing through the flaws in his cultivation? Yuan Xiao asked. How could that possibly be true? The truth is that I happened to chance upon a book that detailed the flaws in the heavenly demon Great Sorrow Palm, so I spoke about it casually before ancient sage Qiu Wu's will. Who would have thought that he would think so highly of me after the matter? Zhongshen said. Offering pointers to an ancient sage was simply too shocking a matter. Having something like that pinned to his reputation was not necessarily something good, especially considering how well-respected ancient sage Qiu Wu was. In any case, he was determined to deny this matter to the end. As for whether the others would believe him or not, that was not his problem anymore. Luo Shenqing and the others felt that Zhongshen was not being completely honest to them, but his explanation was something that they could accept, so they decided to probe no further. Let's return. Even though Luo Shenqing had failed to obtain the Dongshu gourd this time around, he did manage to achieve a breakthrough in his cultivation. As for the others, they also managed to obtain the heavenly demon Great Sorrow Fist, so it was not a wasted trip for them either. Shortly after walking out of the cavern, they were met with the netherworld azure dragon beast. From it, they learned that Zhongchun and the others had already regained consciousness 2 hours ago and left the area immediately. Toward this matter, Luo Shenqing could not help but feel a tinge of disappointment. He had been hoping to try my newfound strength on that fellow so as to vent his many years of frustration, but who knew that the fellow would actually flee? The netherworld azure dragon beast was not an aerial saint beast. While it was capable of moving at an incredible speed due to its superior cultivation, in terms of endurance, it still came nowhere near the 7-colored divine crane. So, Zhongshen moved the netherworld azure dragon beast into the myriad ant hive nest before leaving the valley with the others on the back of the 7-colored divine crane. Here are your formation flags. Zhongshen walked up to Bai Hongyan and passed a huge stack of flags over. He had borrowed them from the other party for the mission, and since the mission had come to an end, it was only right for him to return them. Otherwise, how would he be any different from bandits? My understanding of formations is still deeply lacking, so you can keep the flags. I think you will be able to do much more with them, Bai Hongyan said with a wave of her hand. In the view of others, she was not just a talented demonic tunist, she was also a proficient formation master, a true genius. However, after meeting the young man standing before her, she realized that her skills were still sorely lacking. After witnessing what the young man was capable of, she was embarrassed to even tell others that she was a formation master. This won't do. How can I simply take your stuff like that? Zhongshen quickly shook his hands. Those were grade 8 formation flags, capable of setting up even grade 8 pinnacle formations. Even a single one of those was worth a huge fortune, let alone an entire bunch of them. He did not want to owe a debt to others over material possessions. Not to mention that the other party was a lady, and they were currently before his future brother-in-law. He had to make sure to conduct himself well. If you think it's too much as a gift, it'll do as long as you offer me some pointers when I'm ready to push for a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan. That way, I will be the one who has gotten a good deal instead, Bai Hongyan said. Of course, it was not because she was too rich that she gave so many valuable formation flags away for free. She was intending to make use of this opportunity to win Zhongshen's goodwill so that she would be able to engage his help in the future, especially when she needed to push for a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan. Zhongshen frowned. He did not think that he would have much trouble helping Bai Hongyan achieve a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan, but the main problem was that how long would she take? Beyond the 3rd month of the next year, he probably would not have time to attend to such miscellaneous matters anymore. With this thought in mind, he turned to Bai Hongyan and asked, How long will you need before you are ready to push for a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan? How long? A confident smile emerged on Bai Hongyin's lips as she replied, I'm currently at Saint 7 Dan advanced stage, ready to achieve a breakthrough soon. As long as I cultivate diligently, I should be able to successfully make a breakthrough within 3 years. After reaching Saint 7 Dan pinnacle, I will have to slowly reinforce my cultivation in order to build up a strong foundation for Saint 8 Dan. I will require 10 to 20 years for that. 3 years and 10 years. That is to say that you will need at least 13 years before you can push for a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan? Zhong Xian asked. That's right. Bai Hongyin nodded. My rate of cultivation can already be considered to be faster compared to the others in the Sanctum of Sages. You might not feel it that much at the moment, but every step forward beyond the leaving aperture realm gets increasingly arduous, and the time and effort one has to put in increases exponentially. Zhong Xian nodded in response to those words. He could relate to that. Ever since he reached the leaving aperture realm, he could sense that the quantity of spiritual energy he needed to push for a breakthrough was much greater than before, and the time he took to achieve a breakthrough had increased from 2 hours to 4 hours. Really, the difficulty was so great that it left a numbing sensation on his scalp. If not for that, he would not have been so troubled by the matter. Seeing the awful complexion on the young man's face, Bai Hongyin asked, Zhongshe, is my rate of cultivation too fast or too slow? This. Zhong Xian hesitated for a moment before replying. 13 years is a little too long for me. I don't think I can wait till then. Why don't we do this instead? You should try to achieve a breakthrough to Saint 7 Dan pinnacle on the spot and reinforce your cultivation, and when we finally reach the Sanctum of Sages, I'll help you push for a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan straight. Achieve a breakthrough on the spot. Bai Hongyin's face twitched upon hearing those words. Zhongshe, you must be messing with me. If I could really achieve a breakthrough as and when I like, I would have already done so. I'm not messing with you. Zhong Xian chuckled. It's just a breakthrough to Saint 7 Dan pinnacle, no problem at all. Here, I'll impart a method to you. 20 minutes, no, that's too long. 5 minutes. I'll have you achieve a breakthrough within 5 minutes. Chapter 1367 I'll take you there 5 minutes. Bai Hongyin's eyelids twitched. She forcefully suppressed the disbelief that was rising in her heart and asked, what should I do? If anyone else had said those words to her, she definitely would have had the other party thrown off the back of the crane. However, it was different with the young man before her. Through his guidance, he was able to make Luo Shenqing achieve a breakthrough within just a short span of time. That was more than enough to prove that he was a man of great abilities. Achieving a breakthrough to Saint 7 Dan pinnacle was not a small matter, but compared to a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan, it was indeed a walk in the park. Let me take a look at the cultivation technique manual you are practicing. I need to know the nature of your cultivation technique in order to determine a feasible direction to work in, Zhong Xian said. All right. Bai Hongyin flicked her wrist and passed a book over. Zhong Xian took the book and casually flipped it open. 7 strings music forging art. The cultivation technique that Bai Hongyin practiced was the strongest technique of the demonic tunists. With her body as the zither and her breaths as strings, she was able to produce music on thought. Even a simple word or hum from her was imbued with great power, drawing others under her control. After looking through the other party's cultivation technique, Zhong Xian took out the book he had compiled on Bai Hongyin when she executed her battle technique earlier and studied both of them together. Some time later, he finally arrived at a solution. Cultivators of the 7 strings music forging art are able to temper their zhunqi into the 7 strings of a zither, and upon breaking through to the phantasmal space realm, they are able to form the 7 strings dominion. Enemies who step into the 7 strings dominion will feel as if they have fallen into a world filled with demonic tunes. The slightest lapse in one's guard against it could result in the injuring of one's primordial spirit and the breeding of inner demons within one's mind. It's indeed not too easy to achieve a breakthrough with this cultivation technique. However, you have already accumulated a strong enough foundation for a breakthrough, just that you are currently lacking one last thing, Zhong Xian analyzed with a frown. May I know what it is? Bai Hongyin asked anxiously. Your 7 strings dominion isn't sharp enough yet. If an equally skilled demonic tunist could put you under great pressure through attacking your openings, it should be possible to trigger your potential, allowing you to push for a breakthrough, Zhongxian said. There were quite a few major flaws in Bai Hongyin's cultivation technique, but considering how far she had come cultivating it, it was already too late to change it. If she wanted to surpass her current bottleneck, there was only one way to do it: to use music to stimulate her music. By attacking the biggest openings in her body would be placed under immense stress, and this would force her body to achieve a breakthrough. Put me under great pressure? Bai Hongyin was stunned for a moment before a bitter smile broke on her face. Suppression by demonic tunes requires one to achieve a very high level of mastery in demonic tunes. The only person I know who can achieve this feat is my teacher, but it's a pity that she's not here. As simple as the idea is, it won't be easy to carry it out in practice. I happen to have some experience in demonic tunes as well. If you trust me, we can give it a shot, Zhongxian said with a smile. You are a demonic tunist too? Bai Hongyin could hardly believe what she was hearing. I did learn it for a while. Right, do you have any books regarding demonic tunes? Let me take a look through them. I need as many books as possible so as to find a detailed way as to how I can help you achieve a breakthrough, Zhongxian said. All right. Bai Hongyin nodded. She flicked her wrist, and a huge pile of books immediately appeared on the back of the crane. She turned her gaze to Zhongxian and said, "These are all of the books relating to demonic tunes that I have with me at the moment. There are around 2,000 of them here." Responding with a nod, Zhongxian swiftly scanned through the books with his eyes and collected them all into the library of Heaven's Path. After which, he picked up a book and began flipping through, but meanwhile, his consciousness was immersed in his library of Heaven's Path, studying these books. Even though he had the 7-star demonic tunist emblem, he had only browsed through 6-star demonic tune manuals before, so effectively, his comprehension of demonic tunes was only on par with 7-star primary demonic tunists. Such a level of proficiency was still far from enough for him to resolve the problems Bai Hongyin was facing. Compile. After some commotion, a book materialized in the air. Fortunately, a Heaven's Path demonic tune art was compiled. With just a simple tap, he assimilated the knowledge contained within it. Thus, he opened his eyes once more and said, "All right, I have found a solution to the problem." Bai Hongyin glanced at the discourse on sheet music in Zhongxian's hand and asked in disbelief, "So fast?" She had read the book when she had just become a 7-star demonic tunist. It simply introduced some of the simpler grade 7 demonic tunes and playing techniques. To make an analogy, it was somewhat similar to a collection of nursery rhymes. Was the young man really going to induce a breakthrough in her using such a book? Yuan, without explaining the matter, Zhongxian instructed, "Sit down and take out your zither." Despite harboring an ocean of doubts in her mind, Bai Hongyin still sat down, took out her zither, and gently stroked it with her fingers. Ting-tring. The melody of a zither began sounded in the air. As soon as Bai Hongyin started playing, her disposition changed. It grew towering and imposing, reminiscent of a tall tsunami that threatened to drown one within it. Meanwhile, Zhongxian flicked his wrist and took out a zither as well. This was the zither that school head Jiang had made for him using a unique branch procured from his own residence. Even with his current level of proficiency in demonic tunes, it could still be considered a decent zither. Stroking on the zither lightly, a melody drifted gently into the surroundings. His zither playing did not harness too much offensive power. Instead, it carried a fleeting and distant feeling that seemed to gradually draw one deeper into the melody, putting one in a trance. Even though he had managed to compile the 7-star Heaven's Path demonic tune art, he had not had a chance to cultivate it yet, so his prowess in demonic tunes was still only comparable to a 7-star primary demonic tunist. Nevertheless, every note played was impeccably timed in between Bai Hongyin's playing, messing up her tempo. In terms of prowess, Bai Hongyin felt as if she was facing a 7-star pinnacle demonic tunist head-on. Traying tring ting traying. In just moments, Bai Hongyin's face had turned crimson, and she nearly spurted blood on the spot. He's really powerful. Initially, Bai Hongyin still had some reservations about Zhongxian's proficiency as a demonic tunist, but just from this short encounter, she found that the other party's grasp of demonic tunes had reached a level far above hers. This was truly frightening. Formations, medicine, beast taming. It was already formidable that he possessed such astounding mastery in those occupations, but to think that he would possess such superb talent in demonic tunes as well. Just how in the world did he study? While Zhongxian was stimulating Bai Hongyan's potential to help her push for a breakthrough to Phantasmal Space Realm Pinnacle, Yuan Xiao and the others were looking on with envy on their faces. However, their envy did not last for too long before Yun Lianhai remarked, "Is it just me? Or is the divine crane moving downward?" Luo Shenqing and the others lowered their heads and saw that the seven-colored divine crane, which had been flying steadily a moment ago, was suddenly going on a downward trajectory. It's indeed moving downward. However, at the speed it's moving, this shouldn't pose any trouble, Luo Shenqing replied. Not even a second after saying those words, the divine crane's neck suddenly arched backward, and its eyes were bulging so much that it seemed as if they would pop out at any moment. Who? It fainted on the spot. This. The mouths of Luo Shenqing and the others twitched. They were all Saint Realm experts, so even if their aerial Saint Beast were to plummet, they would still be able to maintain their flight. But can't the two of you calm down a bit? Look, even the seven-colored crane can't tolerate you two anymore. If something really happens to it, how do you plan on returning to the Sanctum of Sages? Luo Shenqing hurriedly waved his hands to support the divine crane and the others, slowly guiding the group to the ground. All the while, Zhongxian and Bai Hongyan remained oblivious to the suffering of the divine crane, and they were still completely engrossed into playing against one another. As such, despite having lost consciousness and landed on the ground, the divine crane's body continued convulsing endlessly, and white foam flowed out from the edges of its mouth. It was almost as if whipping a corpse. Boom. Just as Luo Shenqing and the others were hesitating over whether they should stop those two so as to save the divine crane from its agony, a resounding buzz reverberated from Bai Hongyan's direction. Her aura surged, breaking straight through the clouds and into the heavens. The bottleneck that had confined her at Phantasmal Space Realm Advanced Stage had been broken. Phantasmal Space Realm Pinnacle? She really achieved a breakthrough, and it's just been 5 minutes. Yuan Xiao and Yun Lianhai glanced at one another with widened eyes. Previously, Zhongxian had said that he could help Bai Hongyan achieve a breakthrough within 5 minutes, and putting together the time he had spent on reading through a book and playing the zither, it just happened that 5 minutes had passed. This. Wasn't his calculation a little too precise? All right, it's done. Playing the very last note, Zhongxian put his zither back into his storage ring before exhaling deeply. He stood up and stretched his back lazily. It was only at this moment that he finally recovered his trance, and after a short moment of confusion, a frown emerged on his forehead. Why are we on the ground? With his limited proficiency in demonic tunes, he had needed to focus his attention fully on his playing, so he did not notice the falling of the crane. As such, he could not help but be perplexed by the situation before him. Logically speaking, they should still have been some distance away from reaching the Sanctum of Sages, so why would they suddenly land on the ground? Why don't you take a look for yourself? Seeing the confused look on Zhongxian's face, the veins on Luo Shenqing's temples bulged as he pointed to the side. Zhongxian hurriedly turned his head and saw the divine crane lying unconscious on the ground. Its tongue was stretched out, and its slender legs were twitching every now and then. Amazingly, he realized that its spasms were in tempo with the melody he had been playing before. It must have truly enjoyed the music I have played earlier to be dancing along to my melody even in its sleep, Zhongxian remarked in awe. It sure has fine taste in music. The crowd. Zhongshe, I happen to have reached a bottleneck in my cultivation as well. Can you give me some guidance too? I'm just a step short of a breakthrough, too. Bai Hongyan's breakthrough had left Yuan Xiao and Yun Lianhai deeply moved. They realized that this was a good opportunity for them as well. Zhongxian had initially planned to turn down their requests, but in view of the great sincerity they were showing him, neither of their sincerity was worth any less than the grade 8 formation flags that Bai Hongyan had gifted him. He solemnly pondered over the matter for a split second before reluctantly agreeing to help them as well. Yun Lianhai's cultivation was the lowest of the group, and his fighting prowess was not too strong, so helping him achieve a breakthrough was much easier. On the other hand, due to his powerful defensive prowess and strong foundation in cultivation, it was much more difficult for Yuan Xiao to achieve a breakthrough. Nevertheless, that did not pose much of a problem for Zhongxian. He summoned the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast and commanded it to give Yuan Xiao a beating he would never forget, and not too long later, the latter successfully achieved a breakthrough. The group rested on that spot for an entire day and reinforced their cultivation before continue their journey back. By then, the seven-colored divine crane had already recovered from its previous trauma. Well, it would still make abrupt halts and plummet several hundred meters from time to time in the midst of its flight, but all was still well. However, due to that, their journey ended up being much longer than expected. What that should have been a 5-day flight ended up taking them 10 whole days. Fortunately, this time could not be said to have been wasted. The crowd managed to reinforce their cultivation, thus increasing their fighting prowess significantly. This was especially so for Luo Shenqing. At half-dimension Sundering Realm and ready to achieve a breakthrough at any moment, he was already standing at the very top of the inner sanctum. "Zhongshe, are you interested in accompanying me to look for Zhongchun?" Luo Shenqing suddenly asked while he was leaping down the back of the divine crane after landing in a vast courtyard. "Look for Zhongchun? Indeed. It isn't easy for me to one-up him, so it goes without saying that I should make use of this opportunity to vent my many years of pent-up frustration. Otherwise, wouldn't my breakthrough have been in vain?" Luo Shenqing said as he licked his lips savagely. "This." Zhongxian hesitated for a moment before saying, "Actually, I'm planning to take the 8-star examinations for my other supporting occupations so as to push for a breakthrough to 8-star Master Teacher." It had been quite some time since he had obtained the Sanctum Head token, and time was rather tight for him too. It was about time for him to at least clear the 8-star Master Teacher examination and unlock one of the seals. Otherwise, he might not be able to make it in time for Luo Ruoxin's marriage. "You want to take the 8-star examinations for your supporting occupations?" Luo Shenqing looked at Zhongxian contemplatively. "Which examinations are you planning to take first?" Spirit Awakener, Apothecary, Physician, Painter, Beast Tamer, Celestial Designer, Terpsichore, and Appraiser. "Any of these should be fine," Zhongxian replied. In order to qualify for the 8-star Master Teacher examination, he would need to have 8 8-star supporting occupations, and so far, he had only cleared his 8-star Formation Master examination. He really needed to work much harder. "I have cleared those examinations before, so I am quite close with the personnel there. Why don't you follow me to pummel Zhongchun, and I'll take you on a walk through all of them right after," Luo Shenqing said with a grand wave of his hand. Chapter 1368 Shrine of Seers. "I'll be counting on you then, Brother Luo." Zhongxian was unfamiliar with the Sanctum of Sages, which made it difficult for him to find his way around. Hearing Luo Xuanqing's confident declaration, Zhongxian's eyes immediately lit up. If he could have someone show him around, he would be spared from a great deal of trouble. Besides, he was more than willing to pummel Zhongchun, not to mention the fact that the fellow still owed him quite a few pinnacle spirit stones. A few days had passed since then, so it was about time for him to collect the debt. "There's no need for formalities with me." Luo Shenqing laughed heartily as he took the lead forward. Even though the cultivation of the young man before him was ordinary, he had shown extraordinary expertise in setting up formations and guiding others to achieving a breakthrough. Even for him and the Luo clan, there were many benefits that could be derived from befriending such a person. Not to mention, the young man's personality happened to be to his liking as well. While proceeding ahead, Luo Shenqing sent out a few messages with his communication jade token, and a moment later, he turned to Zhongxian with a smile and said, "That fellow isn't in the inner sanctum but the Shrine of Seers. Let's corner him there." "Shrine of Seers?" Zhongxian frowned. "It's a branch of the Seer Guild, similar to the place where you took the 8-star Formation Master back then," Luo Shenqing explained. "You mean, there's a branch of the Seer Guild here?" Zhongxian's eyes lit up in excitement. He had heard of this occupation in the past. It was an upper 9 paths occupation that was shrouded with mystery. Seers were known to be able to use mysterious methods to foresee the events of the near future and use this knowledge to harness fortune and ward off bad luck. Most sage clans would have a few seers serving as their honorary elders, assisting them in making important decisions. All along, Zhongxian had only heard rumors about the occupation, but so far, he had not met a single seer in real life. Who would have thought that there would actually be a branch of the Seer Guild in the Sanctum of Sages? Of course. Where do you think the Sanctum of Sages is? Most likely, Zhong Chun is trying to get a seer to look into your background after getting done in by your tamed beast, Luo Shenqing said with a chuckle. The fact that Luo Shenqing was able to find out that Zhong Chun was in the Shrine of Seers so quickly could only mean that he had many pair of eyes in the Sanctum of Sages. He's getting a seer just to look into my background. Wouldn't it be far more efficient for him to just ask around? Zhong Xian shook his head. In his view, engaging the help of a seer for something so trivial was truly meaningless. After all, his background was stated in detail in his records, so all it would take was for Zhong Chun to tap into his connections to access it. Furthermore, there was likely a certain degree of error in the ability of any seer. It felt counterintuitive to go through so much trouble just to obtain possibly inaccurate information. The Zhong clan has always been rather superstitious, and they regard seers and their ability of divination very well. The current clan head, Sword Saint Xingming, has even invited all the 9-star seers to the Zhong clan over the past few years, Luo Shenqing said with a disdainful sneer. Why would he invite so many 9-star seers over to the Zhong clan? Zhong Xian asked in bewilderment. As the number 1 clan in the Master-Teacher continent, the Zhong clan's position was extremely stable, and it was blessed with many talented offspring as well. Just what were they so dissatisfied about that they needed to engage the help of seers to look into? Who knows what's going through the minds of those lunatics? Luo Shenqing shrugged. The Shrine of Seers was located in the Hall of Erudition, just like the other examination grounds. Flitting swiftly forward, it did not take them too long to arrive at their destination. Even though the Shrine of Seers was located within the Hall of Erudition, it emanated a completely different vibe from the examination grounds of other occupations. The building was extremely old, carrying the slight scent of the primordial ages. The entire building felt like an upside-down tortoiseshell, covered with all kinds of bizarre cracks on its surface. It was a rather mysterious feeling that was hard to describe, but it seemed like the building was infused with the will of the heavens, serving as a window to peer into the secrets of the world. The doors to the other examination halls were all wide open, but this particular building had its gates tightly shut. This is the Shrine of Seers. UN. I tried picking up the seer occupation at one point in time too, but despite studying it for several days, I wasn't even able to qualify as an apprentice, so I chose to give up on it in the end. Well, it's really quite an enigmatic occupation. It's not right to say that they are a bunch of frauds, as their prophecies and insights do turn out to be astoundingly accurate from time to time. Then again, the notion of using just a few tortoiseshells or copper coins to predict one's fate is just plain ridiculous to me. Luo Shenqing shook his head. Every established occupation has a reason for its existence. The fact that the seer occupation has been able to survive several dozen millenniums without being phased out shows that it has its own meaning of existence, Zhongxian replied. Survival of the fittest, those that were inept and useless would eventually be phased out with time. The fact that the seer occupation was able to be passed down for such a long period of time meant that it was not as simple as it seemed. You really talk like my younger sister. The last time I spoke with her about this matter, she said those words to me as well. Luo Shenqing glanced at Zhongxian with a displeased look. It's my honor to share the same thoughts with the little princess. Zhongxian chuckled softly in response. Don't even bother trying to bootlick me. Luo Shenqing shot a glance at Zhongxian before continuing. It's only because I have a good impression of you that I'm giving you this advice right here. Don't harbor any thoughts toward my younger sister. Firstly, there's no way you'll be able to catch her eye with your strength, and secondly, an outsider like you can't possibly go against the will of the Zhong clan and the Luo clan. This might sound a little harsh, but you'd do well to sever any wishful thinking you have toward her. Hidden within Luo Xuanqing's blunt exterior was a meticulous heart. After spending several days with one another, he could not help but notice that the young man had an unnatural interest in the affairs of his younger sister. If anyone else had been so nosy, he would have simply resorted straight to his fists. After all, his title as the King of Destruction was not for show. However, the young man had helped him greatly and even aided him in achieving a breakthrough. In view of that, he decided to persuade the young man instead. It was not that he was resistant to the idea of having the young man become his brother-in-law, but he knew that such a matter was absolutely impossible. Even he, one of the core members of the Luo clan, was unable to change his younger sister's fate, so what could a mere leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle fellow do? Thus, it was better to sever all wishful thinking right from the start, or else it would only hurt more as time went by. It was not easy for him to meet a person whom he could get along with, and he would hate to see the other party falling into danger over the matter concerning his younger sister. There's no way I'll be able to catch her eye. That's hard to say. After all, who could fathom the capriciousness of life? Zhongxian remarked deeply. It was a sheer coincidence that he stumbled upon Luo Ruoxin in the midst of the verdant mountain back then, and it was also a sheer coincidence that those spirit beasts had gathered around her then, prompting him to make a move to save her. Without all of those coincidences, their fates probably would have never intersected, and they would not have gotten to know one another. It was truly a marvel how fate was able to bring about a meeting of two people from two completely different worlds. Half of those who harbored those thoughts have been crippled by me, and the other half have been crippled by Zhongchun. Luo Shenqing harumphed coldly. Jia. Just as he was about to continue speaking, the doors to the Shrine of Seer suddenly opened. Following which, a young man wearing a long robe walked out from within. Seniors, my teacher invites you in. The young man clasped his fist to greet Luo Shenqing and Zhongxian before displaying an inviting gesture to usher them into the Shrine of Sages. Is your teacher Master Feng Zhongquan? Luo Shenqing assessed the young man before him intently before his eyes suddenly lit up. Indeed. The young man nodded quietly, but he was not able to fully conceal the glee that was beaming on his face. Master Feng Zhongquan has always been an elusive figure in the Sanctum of Sages. I heard that Zhongchun has paid a visit to him 7 times, only to be shut out each time around. Are you sure that your teacher really wants to meet me? Luo Shenqing could hardly control his body from trembling in agitation. Those of the Zhong clan had a deep respect for seers, and Master Feng Zhongquan could be said to be the most formidable seer in the Sanctum of Sages. Zhongchun had visited him on many occasions, only to be turned away before he could even pass over his name scroll. Yet, for Master Feng Zhongquan to send his student to invite him in, didn't that mean that he was far more respected and esteemed than Zhongchun? With this, he would be able to give Zhongchun a good mocking later on. Hearing those words, the young man shot a nonchalant glance at Luo Shenqing and said, My apologies, I should have been clearer in my words. The one whom my teacher wishes to meet is the young friend beside you. Your teacher wants to meet me? Zhongxian was stunned. Why? He had only recently arrived at the Sanctum of Sages, and he did not even know who Master Feng Zhongquan was. Why would the latter suddenly request to meet him? I'm afraid that I don't have the answer to your question. You'll have to head in to find out. In truth, the young man also found the matter inconceivable. His teacher was a deeply esteemed figure on the master-teacher continent, such that he could even afford to snub the deputy sanctum head and the other elders if he wanted to, and there would be nothing they could do to him. Yet, he was actually requesting to meet a 20-year-old freshman who had no particularly noteworthy background, and he had even instructed him to personally invite the other party in. This was truly perplexing. It would have been understandable if the other party was like the little princess, wielding formidable prowess, but he was only a humble leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle cultivator. He might have been considered a genius anywhere else on the master-teacher continent, but in the Sanctum of Sages, there were plenty of students who could rival or even surpass him. Even at the very most, his talents could only be considered average. Master Feng Zhongquan wants to meet Zhongshe? Luo Shenqing widened his eyes in disbelief. He had thought that this was a good opportunity for him to mock Zhongchun, but who would have thought that the person whom Master Feng Zhongquan wanted to meet with was the person beside him? All right then. Zhongxian was bewildered by the abnormal situation, but seeing that the young man before him really knew nothing at all, he decided to head in to take a look. After all, he had been intrigued by the mysterious abilities that seers wielded for a long time, and this would be a good opportunity for him to see what they were capable of. So, under the young man's lead, he walked into the Shrine of Seers. The interior of the Shrine of Seers seemed to be even older than how it appeared outside. There were many bizarre flags planted on the ground, and they divided the main hall into many narrow sectors. There were several dozen young men sitting in a circle in each of these narrow sectors. Some were holding onto a copper coin whereas others were holding onto a tortoise shell. Their eyes were firmly shut, and the tight contemplative frown between their brows suggested that they were trying to fathom something. At the middle of the circle was a reddish-green beetle placed on top of searing flames, and it looked so withered that it seemed like it was just a push away from falling into the embrace of death. Is that the light-shelled beetle, renowned for being able to survive amid lightning? Zhongxian wondered doubtfully. He had never seen a light-shelled beetle before, but he had read records on them. According to the rumors, these lifeforms neither ate nor drank. Only on stormy days where the rain poured and lightning raged would they rise from their hiding places and dash into the sky, taking in the power of the lightning to sustain their existence. Light-shelled beetles were extremely elusive, and their numbers were severely limited as well, such that it was viewed as one of the hardest beasts to find in the world by the beast tamers. Yet, to think that they would be roasting it on the flames, this was really perplexing. He had never heard of the light-shelled beetles being edible, and even if they were edible, how were they going to split it among the several dozen young men? It would not even be enough to stuff the gap between their teeth. Noticing the doubtful look on Zhongxian's face, Luo Shenqing sent a telepathic message over to fill him in. This is one of the daily training that seers have to undergo. The crux behind this exercise is to seal all of their senses and use their will to fathom the will of the heavens to predict whether the light-shelled beetle has been burned to death or whether it'll climb out from somewhere. He might not be a seer himself, but he had spent a few days of his life attempting to learn divination, so he had some idea of what was going on within the Shrine of Seers. This Luo Xuanqing's explanation only served to plunge Zhongxian deeper into confusion. Placed upon flames, there was a chance that the light-shelled beetle could be burned to death at any moment. But similarly, there was also a chance that it would manage to rise from the searing heat and flee. In a sense, was this not the same as Schrödinger's cat? Until the outcome was determined, all guesses would be naught but guesses. Seemingly noticing the communication behind him, the young man turned around and explained to them, the light-shelled beetle's ability to resist lightning is, in truth, a struggle against the heavens. For this reason, it's known as the seer beetle. Through predicting the life and death of such a lifeform, one is able to better grasp the elusive and capricious nature of the will of the heaven. I see. Zhongxian nodded, but it was difficult to tell whether he truly understood those words or not. He shot a glance at the beetle on the charcoal and asked with a frown, given the intense heat of the charcoal there, that light-shelled beetle should already be on the verge of death, no? On the verge of death. Hearing those words, the young man shook his head with a chuckle. I've divined that beetle before. It'll live up to 100 years. But before he could finish his words, the sound reminiscent to a balloon popping echoed in the air. The light-shelled beetle that was lying on the charcoal a while ago abruptly swelled up and exploded into dust. Peng. Ah! Zhongxian shot a bizarre look at the young man and asked, could it be that today is its 100th birthday? Chapter 1369 Voyeur. Instead of replying to Zhongxian's words, the young man walked up to the light-shelled beetle and examined it closely in disbelief. His divination ability as a seer had reached the level of 8-star, allowing him to foresee many events with a high level of accuracy. He had divined the beetle before him multiple times, and the result he got each time was that it would die of old age. Why would it suddenly blow up now? Of course, saying that it would be able to live up to 100 years old was just a metaphor. It wouldn't just literally live to its 100th birthday. Furthermore, even if that was the case, it didn't make sense for it to explode into dust right after those words were spoken. The young man stared at the beetle with a conflicted look on his face for quite a while, but he was still unable to make sense out of the situation. In the end, he decided not to think too much into it and continued leading the duo forward. Not too long later, they arrived before a room. Before he could even knock, a voice already sounded from within, "Come in." Following which, the room to the door slowly cracked open. Taking a look within, Zhongxian saw an elder seated at the center of the hall. The young man standing beside him was no other than the person they were looking for, Zhong Chun. At this moment, he had already recovered from the injuries he had sustained, and his aura felt a little sharper and purer than before. It seemed like the vicious pummeling he had received previously had helped to beat out the impurities in his body, bringing about a considerable rise in his fighting prowess. A blessing in disguise indeed. "It's you." Upon seeing Zhongxian walking through the door, Zhong Chun's face immediately turned livid. As a genius of the Zhong clan, he never thought that he would be pummeled by the tamed beast of a nobody in the Sanctum of Sages, nearly losing his life in the valley. Recalling the embarrassment and humiliation he had been put through, his face swiftly reddened in fury. However, he swiftly remembered something and turned to look at the old man beside him in astonishment. "Elder Feng, is the esteemed guest you spoke of him?" Previously, in the midst of their conversation, Elder Feng suddenly tasked his student to head out and usher an esteemed guest in. Back then, he had thought that it would be a top-notch expert or a respected elder of the Sanctum of Sages. Never in his mind had he even fathomed that it would actually be this fellow. That fellow only managed to overwhelm him by lucking out and taming the netherworld azure dragon beast. Otherwise, there was no way a mere leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle would possibly be able to face him straight on. Surely there was no need for Master Feng, whom even their clan head would have to show deep respect to view him so highly. "That's right." Elder Feng stood up and assessed Zhongxian intently. The more he looked, the brighter the gleam in his eyes became, and a while later, he couldn't help but exclaim in amazement, "It's indeed the discarnate constitution of divination." Discarnate constitution of divination? Zhongxian frowned in bewilderment. Even though he was unable to determine his own condition through the Library of Heaven's Path, he did possess a deep knowledge of the various unique constitutions there were out there from the books he had assimilated so far, and there was none that corresponded to his own condition. In other words, he was an ordinary man who couldn't be any more ordinary. So, what in the world was the discarnate constitution of divination? Why hadn't he heard it before? If he really possessed such a unique constitution, why would his cultivation still advanced so slowly, such that he wouldn't even be able to catch up with his student and his girlfriend? The number of grand divination, 49 with a discarnate one, and you happen to possess that discarnate physique. Elder Feng stroked his beard and explained. To use conventional terms, it means that it's impossible to use the means of divination to determine your fate and thus, future. The number of grand divination is a terminology from Ju Yi, which is the core of Yi Jing or I Ching, an ancient Chinese divination text. However, there is no clear grasp as to what grand divination truly means, and so, the number of grand divination remains an enigma to the world. Before Zhongxian could make sense of what was being said, the young man beside him had already widened his eyes in disbelief. "Teacher, that legendary unique constitution really exists. I also thought that it was a legend until that incident, which made me understand that not only does such a unique constitution exists, there are even a couple of them out there in the world." Elder Feng shook his head and said, seemingly unwilling to linger too long on this matter. "If you don't believe me, you can give it a try. This." "All right then." The young man was stunned for a few seconds before taking out 3 copper coins. He held them tightly in his grasp and mused for a moment before tossing them into the air. The copper coins swiftly dropped onto the ground and spun non-stop, but before a divination could appear, resounding catcher, catcher, catcher sounded, and cracks appeared on the coins. And soon after, just like with the light-shelled beetle, peng, the copper coins exploded into dust. The young man's face immediately turned pale, and as if having sustained a heavy blow, he was forced to retreat several steps back. A trail of blood seeped down the corner of his lips as stupefaction rippled across his face. The young man was clearly right before his eyes, but for some inexplicable reason, his divination was unable to work on the young man, or to be more exact, It felt as if he was attempting to divine something that didn't exist in the world at all, a discarnate entity. How could the concepts of karma and history possibly apply to a discarnate entity? How is it? Having known this outcome, Elder Feng looked at his disciple and said. The young man took in a deep to suppress his injuries before replying in resignation, I really can't divine anything at all. Of course, he's a void in the world. Not only his fate, even everything he has done and is going to do will be veiled from the eyes of the world. Elder Feng said. In this moment, the young man could finally understand why his teacher wanted to meet this fellow. Discarnate constitution of divination, this was the constitution that was most suited to become a seer. There weren't any records of anyone possessing such a constitution, but even in the entire history of mankind, there should only be several dozen of them existent in this world. He could have never thought that the ordinary-looking man before him would actually possess it as well. Everything I have done and am going to do will be veiled from the eyes of the world. Zhongxian frowned upon hearing the words exchanged between the duo. It took him a while before he could fully grasp that notion. Most likely, the reason why divination didn't work on him was due to the Library of Heaven's Path. The Library of Heaven's Path could probably be considered as the very manifestation of the heavens, so naturally, concealing the will of the heavens and impeding others from looking in was probably just a walk in the park for it. In other words, he didn't possess the discarnate constitution of divination at all. Indeed. In other words, you are a fault in the world. If you were to become a seer, no matter how you peer into the secrets of the heavens, you still wouldn't suffer any backlash at all. Elder Feng exclaimed with glowing eyes. The act of divining the future was equivalent to revealing the secrets of the heavens, and naturally, seers would have to suffer the retribution of the heavens for their actions. For this reason, high-ranking seers usually didn't end well. When one looks into the abyss looks back at one. If one were to just divine smaller affairs, one might still be able to avoid the notice of the heavens. However, if one were to attempt to divine something that would affect the trajectory of the world, they would soon find the very ill will of the heavens directed against them. Eventually, most of them would meet their ends while undergoing the tribulation of the heavens. Despite the seemingly glamorous exterior of seers, they were, in essence, voyeurs who sought to peer into the secrets of the heavens, and thus, the dangers they faced were greater than any other occupation. However, there was one exception to the rule, the discarnate constitution of divination. Those who possessed such a constitution were existences who weren't even within the calculations in the heavens, and no matter how they peered at the secrets of the heavens, they wouldn't face any punishment from the heavens. A constitution that allowed others to flout the rules openly without being punished, it was as if it was made just for seers. I was only able to notice it when Zhong Chun requested me to divine your background and your teacher. Elder Feng explained. Hearing those words, Zhong Chun's face turned crimson. He felt so stifled that he could explode on the spot. After the pummeling he had received, he had been wanting to get even with Zhongxian. For this reason, he spent a heavy price to request for Elder Feng's help, wanting the latter to help him divine Zhongxian's background. Yet, his efforts only seemed to have placed Zhongxian on a higher pedestal. Not only had he not found out anything more about Zhongxian, the latter even became Elder Feng's esteemed guest. It was as if even the world was on his side. Your discarnate constitution of divination is most suited for seers. Elder Feng looked at Zhongxian with pulsating excitement in his eyes. So, what do you think about becoming my direct disciple? Elder Feng, you want to take that fellow in as your direct disciple? But you have never taken in any direct disciples before. Zhong Chun's face twitched in shock. While seers might not possess exceptional fighting prowess, due to the unique nature of their occupation, they were respected as one of the upper 9 paths occupations. This was especially so for Elder Feng, who was considered to be one of the greatest seers in the world. Just the fact the polite attitude their clan head maintained before Elder Feng showed his standing on the master-teacher continent. If Zhongxian were to really become Elder Feng's direct disciple, all his hopes of vengeance would be dashed. Direct disciple? The young man by the side showed a face full of envy and admiration. He was only Elder Feng's ordinary student, which meant that he wasn't entitled to inheriting the crux of Elder Feng's heritage. Most likely, He would only remain an 8-star seer for life, unable to take a step forward anymore. But again, there was nothing he could do. The discarnate constitution of divination was something one was born with, and no amount of hard work would change that. On the other hand, Zhongxian didn't expect Elder Feng to request him to become his direct disciple on their first meeting. Instead of responding to that question straight, he looked at Elder Feng with a doubtful look and asked, "Is the discarnate constitution of divination very rare?" "Very much so. I only know of 4 people in the Master-Teacher continent who possesses that constitution, and that's including you." Elder Feng replied. 4 people. May I know who are they? Not expecting that there would be 3 people who would possess that constitution, Zhongxian couldn't help but be a little curious. At the same time, Zhongchun also quickly stemmed the thoughts in his mind and turned his attention over. "You must be the Luo clan's Luo Shenqing, right?" Instead of replying Zhongxian's question, Elder Feng suddenly turned to Luo Shenqing and asked. "Shenqing pays respect to Elder Feng." Luo Shenqing clasped his fist and said, "Yuan, there's no need to stand on ceremony. Back then, when your younger sister sealed her cultivation and left the Luo clan, your clan head paid me a visit and requested my help in divining her location. However, I was unable to divine her exact whereabouts, and if my guess fails me not, it's like that she possesses the discarnate constitution of divination too." Elder Feng said, "My younger sister possesses the discarnate constitution of divination?" Luo Shenqing was surprised by the revelation before nodding in realization. Previously, he had been wondering why despite the many seers there were in the Luo clan, they were still unable to find his younger sister's whereabouts for such a long period of time. It was due to this incident that he had a biased view toward seers, thinking that they were just fraudsters out to dupe money and prestige out of others. However, if his younger sister possessed the discarnate constitution of divination, that would explain everything. Elder Feng nodded in response. "What about the other 2? Zhongchun asked. "The first person I have found to have possessed that constitution is the young prodigy of your Zhong clan. No matter how I attempt to divine his whereabouts, I was simply unable to find any trace of him anywhere. It's as if he has never existed in the world at all." Elder Feng said. "The young prodigy?" Zhongchun heaved a sigh of relief. It was fortunate that the young prodigy possessed such a constitution as well, or else he would be spending the next few years hearing the gleeful Luo Shenqing harping on this matter. "The last person is a mysterious young lady I met a few months back. She is roughly Zhongshi's age, and she possesses extraordinary strength, unlike anything I have seen before. However, it's a pity that she disappeared before I could catch a word with her." Elder Feng shook her head and sighed. "I see." Zhongxian nodded. All along, he had been hearing about how formidable the young prodigy was, and after hearing what Elder Feng had said, he was really starting to catch a glimpse into what kind of figure he was going up against. He was only able to avoid the divination of seers due to his possession of the Library of Heaven's Path, but to think that the young prodigy would actually possess the discarnate constitution of divination. It was no wonder why he was able to remain hidden for so long. It turned out that not even the Luo clan had any way to figure out where he was. "Wait a moment. You said that it's impossible to fathom my fate and my history due to my discarnate constitution of divination. If that's the case, how did you know that Brother Luo and I have just arrived before your doorstep previously, even sending out your student to receive us?" Zhongxian suddenly thought of something, and he couldn't help but frown in confusion. Since it was impossible to divine his whereabouts, there should be no way Elder Feng should have known that he would be coming by today. Furthermore, thinking back, the door to the room also opened right when they have just arrived outside it. Seemingly not expecting to hear such a question, Elder Feng was visibly taken aback for a moment before directing a bizarre look at Zhongxian. "Have you never used your spiritual perception before? This room isn't located too far away from the entrance, so it's very easy to extend one's spiritual perception over." Zhongxian. Chapter 1370 Sage She's Tortoiseshell, but who could have thought that it would just be a simple spiritual perception scan? Perhaps it was due to the awareness that he was at the Shrine of Seers, Everything that had happened seemed to be veiled with a layer of mystery in his head. For this reason, he thought that it was due to the unique abilities of a seer that Elder Feng was able to divine his arrival and dispatch a student to receive them. But who could have thought that it would just be a simple spiritual perception scan? That was an ability that all cultivators would unlock upon reaching Saint Tu Dan. Once activated, one would be able to perceive everything within a given radius. With this ability, it was indeed not too difficult for Elder Feng to notice their arrival. "How is it? Are you willing to become my direct disciple?" After explaining the matter, Elder Feng continued directing his heated gaze upon Zhongxian. There was no way he would be able to take in the little princess of the Luo clan, the young prodigy of the Zhong clan, or the mysterious young lady as his students, but as for Zhongxian, he felt that he stood quite a huge chance. If he could take Zhongxian in as his direct disciple, with the latter's tremendous potential in the occupation, they would be able to make seers great again. "Pardon me, but I already have my own teacher and heritage, so it wouldn't really be convenient for me to acknowledge anyone else as my own teacher." Zhongxian shook his head. "I have the fortune of meeting your teacher, Yang Xian, once before. While he does have an eccentric temperament, he wouldn't have any qualms about you acknowledging someone else as your teacher for other supporting occupations." Instead of getting mad at Zhongxian's rejection, Elder Feng reasoned calmly. Before Zhongxian could say anything, Zhongchun's body jolted, and he exclaimed in disbelief, "Yang Xian? Elder Feng means to say that Zhongxian's teacher is Yang Shi of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters?" Even Luo Shenqing also widened his eyes upon hearing those words. They did mention Yang Xian's name during the journey to obtain the Dongshu gourd, but Zhongxian didn't say anything about him then. Why would he suddenly turn out to be Yang Xian's student? If that was really the case, it would be understandable why Zhongxian would have no fear about the repercussions from pummeling Zhongchun. Even though the Zhong clan was the #1 sage clan on the Master Teacher continent, it still paled far in comparison to the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. As the first Grand Elder, other than the seat of the Pavilion Master, which had been empty for several millenniums now, Yang Xian's standing was second to none in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarter. "Due to your constitution, I am unable to divine anything relating to your lineage. Nevertheless, through using my authority in the Sanctum of Sages, I'm still able to access your record files. To rise through the ranks from the humble Tianqian kingdom and reach such a height, not to mention that you have always identified yourself as Yang Shi's student, I really can't imagine any other master teacher who is capable of grooming a student as talented as you," Elder Feng said with a chuckle. While he was unable to divine Zhongxian's profile, he was still able to access the latter's records. Considering how often Zhongxian had identified his teacher as Yang Xian before others, it wasn't too difficult to dig that up too. Zhongxian immediately broke out in cold sweat. The only reason why he identified himself as Yang Xian's student was because he thought that it was just a made-up name, so he used it as he pleased. How was he supposed to know that that fellow really existed, and even possessed such a high standing at that? This was really a huge headache. If Yang Xian were to drop by the Sanctum of Sages and say that he didn't have such a student, his lie would be immediately exposed. Without this protective umbrella, it wouldn't take long before greedy individuals turned their eyes to him, wanting to uncover the secrets behind the swift rise in his cultivation and supporting occupation. "How is it?" Noticing the changes on Zhongxian's face, Elder Feng thought that the other party was seriously contemplating over the issue, so he chuckled softly and said, "If you still harbor some reservations regarding the matter, I can send a message into the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters and seek his opinion on this matter on your behalf." Regarding that, Zhongxian's eyebrows leaped up upon hearing those words, and he immediately spoke up anxiously. "I am very thankful to Elder Feng's high opinion of me. However, I have never come into contact with anything relating to seers, so if possible, I would like to access the books relating to it. If I do possess some talent in the art of divination, I would be more than delighted to take up your offer. Otherwise, I would feel guilt-ridden if my lack of talent in the field were to blemish your reputation." This sure was a difficult position he was in. He had only come here with Luo Shenqing to get a go at Zhongchun, but who could have thought that he would end up getting such a passionate offer by someone else to become his student, and that person was even threatening to tell on him to Yang Xian if he were to reject his offer. Being too outstanding sure was troublesome. Was his simple wish of living an ordinary life really that difficult to achieve? Since that was the case, he decided to first take a look through all of the seer-related books first. By then, let's see who would become whose student. You want to access our library of books. Seeing that Zhong Xian wasn't resistant to the idea of becoming his student, Elder Feng heaved a sigh of relief. With a look that said there's no way you can't possibly not be a genius, he chuckled, there are simply too many things to learn as a seer for you to master the art within just a day or two. Actually, there's no need to go through so much trouble. There's a far simpler way to gauge your talent as a seer. Gauge my talent as a seer? Zhong Xian frowned. Yu Chen, bring the tortoiseshell over here. Elder Feng instructed with a wave of his hand. Yes. The young man turned around and left, and not too long later, he returned with an ancient tortoiseshell carefully held between his hands. The ancient tortoiseshell was slightly grayish in color, and its surface was densely filled with slight cracks. Even before coming close to it, Zhong Xian could already feel a slight quivering in the space surrounding it, as if the secrets of the world were sealed within it, awaiting curious minds to peer into it. Could this be Sage Shi's tortoiseshell? Zhong Chun widened his eyes in astonishment. Stroking his beard, Elder Feng turned to confused Zhong Xian and explained with a smile, Sage Shi is a renowned expert whose time predates even that of Kongsha. Through observing the patterns on the back of the long-living tortoise, he managed to grasp the will of the heavens and founded the seer occupation. He has passed down many divination-related artifacts, and the most famous of them all is a tortoise shell. That tortoise shell is known to be the #1 treasure of the Seer Guild, and it's stored in the deepest and most secure region of the guild. It's used to divine the trajectory of the continent's fate and the rise and fall of the world. Of course, not even I have the rights to use it. The one before you is a replica which a 9-star pinnacle seer, Elder Ji Chan, created many years ago. However, don't underestimate it just because it's a replica. It's through the divination of this tortoiseshell that ancient sage Bo Shong found that several dozen millenniums worth of fortune was gathered in this land, allowing it to survive the trial of time, thus leading to him establishing the sanctum of sages on this land. That should be more than enough to verify its prowess. Hearing those words, Zhong Xian's eyebrows shot up in astonishment. It wasn't too difficult to gather spiritual energy and fortune within a land. High-ranked formation masters were capable of doing that too. However, to retain spiritual energy and fortune within a land for several millenniums or even several dozen millenniums, especially amidst an ever-changing world and environment. This was not something that they were capable of. To do that would require one to not only foresee the changes in the land itself but those surrounding it as well. To be able to divine it accurately, the tortoiseshell could definitely be considered as a priceless treasure. This tortoiseshell has been passed down 121 generations so far, and all 102 9-star pinnacle seers who have appeared within this timeframe have all used it at some point in their life. As a result of that, their wills are all infused within the tortoiseshell as well. So, just by placing your hand on top of it, they will be able to assess whether you possess talent as a seer or not. Elder Feng said as he lightly stroked the ancient tortoiseshell in front of him. Zhong Xian didn't expect the other party to take out such a valuable artifact to assess his talent. At this point, it would only be disrespectful of him if he were to turn down the other party any more than this, so he asked, I just have to place my hand on it. Yuan. If you still harbor some doubts toward its effects, I can have others showcase it to you. Elder Feng turned his gaze to Zhong Chun before continuing on, You have been wanting to learn divination from me for many years, only to be turned away each time around. It's not that I'm intentionally making things difficult for you or trying to test your patience, but you are simply unsuited for this occupation. Place your hand on this tortoiseshell and see for yourself. This. Zhong Chun's face twitched. He would have never thought that a day would come where he would actually be used as a counterexample. As displeased as he was, he still walked forward and slowly placed his hand on the tortoiseshell. Seemingly sensing the touch of a living being, a slight radiance emanated from in between the many cracks on the tortoiseshell. Catcher. It was a rather bizarre sight. The light seemed to be weaving across the many cracks on the tortoiseshell, and as if playing an instrument, a crackling sound echoed in the air. Very soon, 2 ancient runes surfaced before everyone's eyes. Elder Feng glanced at the runes and shook his head. Yu Chen, explain these 2 runes to the others. Yes. The young man stepped forward and said, what these runes over here mean is that the individual tested is of ordinary aptitude and is unfated with the art of divination. Ordinary aptitude? Then what would the runes for the talented be like? Zhong Chun asked with a hint of indignance in his voice. The current clan head and elders of the Zhong clan held seers in high esteem. If he could achieve a high level of mastery in the art of divination, it was likely that he would be regarded highly and perhaps, he might even be brought into the circle of the upper echelon of the clan. It was for this reason that he persistently visited Elder Feng despite being rejected time and time again. He was still harboring hope that the rejection might just Elder Feng's way of testing him, but who could have thought that the real problem lay in his lack of talent? The aptitude of a seer can basically be divided into 6 tiers, namely inferior, ordinary, fair, superior, and pinnacle, the young man explained. For those who are unable to read the runes, there's a far easier to interpret them. The greater the number of runes, the higher one's aptitude toward divination is. A single rune would mean inferior, 2 runes would mean ordinary, so on and so forth. If 6 runes were to appear, it would mean that the individual possesses unparalleled aptitude in divination. After saying those words, the young man placed his palm on the tortoiseshell. Catcher, 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 catcher. Brilliant light weaved across the cracks of the tortoiseshell, and the same crackling sound echoed in the air once more, but this time, it was more numerous. Slowly, 5 runes surfaced from the tortoiseshell. Superior. Zhong Chun gulped down a mouthful of saliva in shock. He had met Yu Chen many times around, and he thought that the latter only caught Elder Feng's sight by sheer luck. He had never thought that the latter would actually possess such a high aptitude toward divination. Given that Yu Chen was only an ordinary student despite his superior aptitude as a mere ordinary, he really didn't stand a chance at all. I would like to give it a try too. Stepping forward, Luo Shenqing placed his palm on it, and 2 runes appeared. Just like Zhong Chun, his aptitude was ordinary too. Luo Shenqing was initially a little disappointed, but he consoled himself by telling himself that his aptitude was at least not any beneath Zhong Chun. Afterward, he turned to Zhongxian and said, Zhongshe, you should give it a try too. All right. Knowing there's no way for him to back out of this, Zhongxian stepped forward. Previously, he had said that he would take Elder Feng as his teacher if he showed aptitude toward divination. Was he really going to have to acknowledge another person as his teacher? This was really a little difficult for him to accept. Perhaps, he could try using the Heaven's Pathshanchi to conceal the results. On the other hand, watching as Zhongxian stepped forward, an excited gleam surfaced in Elder Feng's eyes. The discarnate constitution of divination was a legendary physique that all seers sought for. There were no precedents which he could use as a reference to fathom how many runes the young man would be able to induce, but most likely, it would be beyond 6. Who? Before his expectant eyes, Zhongxian placed his palm on the tortoiseshell. Wang. A light buzz sounded in the air, and a blinding light began streaming across the cracks in the tortoiseshell. Catcher, catcher, catcher. Crackling sounds echoed one after another in high frequency, almost as if one was stir-frying beans. With so many crackling sounds echoing, I wonder how many runes would appear. Zhong Chun clenched his fists tightly as he looked at the sight before him with reddened eyes. Previously, when he placed his hand on the tortoiseshell and it crackled twice, 2 runes appeared. Following which, when Yu Chen placed his hand on the tortoiseshell and it crackled 5 times, 5 runes appeared. And now, the tortoiseshell had already crackled for several dozen times in response to Zhongxian's touch. It couldn't be that several dozen runes were going to appear, right? If that's the case, just how immense of a talent did he possess? In his state of shock, he suddenly saw Elder Feng's face warping into horror, and the latter dashed forward furiously. However, it was already too late. With a particularly conspicuous Hong Long, the ancient tortoiseshell exploded into dust. Chapter 1371 The Tragic Elder Feng. Zhongxian was completely dumbstruck, not knowing whether he should retract his hand from the tortoiseshell or not. Whether I am talented or not, it'd do for you to just reflect it accordingly. Why the heck did you explode on the spot for? All I had done was to use a bit of my Heaven's Path Shinchi and the power of the Library of Heaven's Path to disguise myself. Do you really have to do this to me? Previously, when Elder Feng took out the tortoiseshell, he had treated it extremely carefully, as if it was his child. For it to explode just like that, wouldn't the other party pit his life against him? Just as Zhongxian was at a complete loss as to what to do, he saw the old man who was still smiling a second ago suddenly standing before him, staring at the remains of the tortoise shell on the ground with a twitching face, seemingly on the verge of going berserk. Teacher. Not expecting such a situation to occur either, Yu Chen was shocked beyond words too. While others might not understand the significance of the tortoise shell, he knew how important it was to his teacher. Having it reduced to dust like that was no different from claiming his teacher's life. My tortoise shell. The trembling Elder Feng reached out to stroke the remains on the ground, and in just an instant, he looked as if he had withered many years. Elder Feng, he didn't do it on purpose. Why don't I have a new one forged out for you? Your tortoise shell was already old and decrepit prior to this, filled with many cracks. It was only a matter of time before it broke. Just last year, I came to know an extremely skilled craftsman at the Chen village. His handicraft is truly exquisite, and the price he charged is fair as well. Shall I introduce him to you? Luo Shenqing consoled. Pu. Unable to take it anymore, Elder Feng spurted a mouthful of blood. Cough cough. Zhongxian rolled his eyes at his future brother-in-law before shaking his head speechlessly. You shouldn't try to console others if you don't know how to go around doing it. You are only making things worse. A tortoise shell of this tier was incredibly valuable. Do you think that you would be able to replace it just by forging a close replica? Seeing that Luo Shenqing couldn't be relied on, Zhongxian could only make a move himself. He pondered for a moment before speaking up earnestly. Elder Feng, what is done cannot be undone, so there's no use remaining upset about the matter. It's just a tortoise shell anyway. Why don't I capture a few over tomorrow so that you can make as many of it as you want? If you like, you could even boil a pot of fine soup with their flesh too. Pu. Elder Feng spurted even more blood. Or else, why don't I make a new one for you then? Seeing that the situation seemed to only be getting worse with his consolation, Zhongxian was really at a loss as to what to do. While he was touching the tortoiseshell previously, he managed to compile a book on it in the Library of Heaven's Path. Despite the long heritage behind it and its high tier, it was plagued with many flaws too. As long as Zhongxian was willing to set his mind to it and managed to gather sufficient books on it, he should be able to forge another tortoiseshell that was of the same tier or even higher. With this thought in mind, Zhongxian decided to immerse his consciousness into the Library of Heaven's Path to study the book so as to analyze the feasibility of creating an exact replica of the tortoiseshell when Yu Chen's anxious voice suddenly sounded. Teacher. His voice was quivering, carrying deep fear toward something. Sensing the anxiety in the voice, the depressed Elder Feng turned his head over. Look at that. Yu Chen pointed to the roof above them. Elder Feng hurriedly raised his head, and what he saw caused his eyes to narrow in fear. At the same time, noticing the peculiar reaction of the duo, Zhongxian and the others raised their heads as well, and in the next instant, they froze on the spot. A huge crack had appeared on the tortoise-shell-shaped building above them, and it was swiftly creeping its way across the area. The inscriptions that were used to fortify the building seemed to have been rendered useless in this very moment, as if they had encountered a force which even they were helpless before. How could this be? Elder Feng clawed his head in horror. The explosion of the Sage Shi's tortoiseshell could still be attributed to its old age and wear and tear, thus resulting in retribution from the heavens. On the other hand, the tortoiseshell building had a huge investment in manpower and resources to construct it, and in terms of durability, not even a Saint 8 Dan Pinnacle expert's full-strength attack would be able to cause the slightest damage to it. Why would it collapse all of a sudden? Stop! Bellowing furiously, Elder Feng rushed forward in an attempt to stop the destruction. No matter what, He couldn't allow the Shrine of Seers to collapse just like that. However, despite his furious output of zhenqi, he was still unable to stop the collapse of the building. It was as if an inexplicable force that no man could rival was acting upon the building, forcing the collapse to occur. And before this force, even Saint Ninden experts were nothing more than ants, not even worth a mention. Catcher. Catcher. Finally, the roof reached the limits of its durability, and with a series of explosions, rubble began plummeting from above. Many of the seers were immediately jolted out of their focused state, and they anxiously opened their eyes and darted out. As for Zhongxian and the rest, it somehow felt wrong if they were to run away in this moment, so they could only drive their zhenqi and form a barrier above them to fend off the falling rubble. Hualala. Even amidst a cloud of dust, it took just a mere glance to see that the ancient tortoiseshell building was no more, replaced by a mere lump of rubble. All of the formations and the sort that it harnessed had also been completely destroyed as well. This. Zhongxian blinked his eyes in a daze as he remarked, "Isn't this building a little too poorly built? Just who is the architect behind it? If any ordinary humans had been in here, they would have been crushed to death." The building still appeared rather sturdy when he looked at it from the outside, but it turned out to be just a false sense of security. It was fortunate that he was strong, otherwise he would have never been able to survive the collapsing rubble no matter how many lives he had. Pu. Once again, Elder Feng spurted a mouthful of blood. "Teacher, what's going on?" Yu Chen rushed over to Elder Feng's side and asked anxiously. It took a while before Elder Feng managed to calm down the stifled sensation in his heart. He looked at the rubble all around him with a desolated look and sighed deeply. It must be the retribution of the heavens. Retribution of the heavens? Hearing that phrase, Zhongxian asked in incomprehension. Seers sought to peer into the secrets of the heavens in order to receive insights into what the future holds, which is a violation of the natural laws of the world. For that reason, our occupation is deeply abhorred by the heavens. As such, we have to use unique means in order to conceal our presence from the will of the heavens, thus leaving the retribution of the heavens nowhere to strike. However, even such means aren't completely infallible. After all, the heavens possess means which none of us can fathom. Take the situation just now for example. It seems that the will of the heavens have somehow slipped past the barriers we have put up and destroyed the entire place from within, thus resulting in the current state of affairs. Elder Feng hesitated for a moment before explaining slowly. As a 9-star seer, even though everything had happened abruptly, he was still able to fathom roughly what had just happened with a swift divination. Those who had reached the top in a certain field were bound to catch the envy of the heavens, and this envy would often manifest in a physical form such as the leaving aperture ordeal and the dimension sundering ordeal. In a sense, this could be considered to be the heavens' retribution toward those who dared to vie power from it. And this was even more so for seers, who sought to peer into the secrets of the heavens. The only reason why they were able to survive so long was due to the elaborate preparations they had made to guard against the will of the heavens. Using the language of Zhongxian's world, it would be similar to how illegal gambling dens would swiftly hide all traces of their activities as soon their sentries caught sight of the arrival of the police, leaving the policemen completely helpless against them. And of course, when seers dared to peer into the secrets of the heavens, they didn't just rely on their courage and bravado either. They would have made ample preparations in advance. However, they just didn't expect that despite the tight guard they had put up against it, they were still noticed. Not only was the tortoiseshell destroyed, even the sanctum of sages several dozen millenniums-old shrine of seers was destroyed as well. Elder Feng clutched his chest as a stabbing pain assaulted his heart. On the other hand, upon hearing those words, Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up in astonishment. He had previously attributed the incident to the lack of durability of the tortoiseshell and the building, but it turned out to be related to the will of the heavens instead. When he used the Library of Heaven's path to examine the tortoiseshell broke. When he used it to help him assess whether he would be able to create an exact replica, the entire shrine collapsed on them. Could the will of the heavens slipping past the barriers which Elder Feng had spoken about possibly be related to the Library of Heaven's path? If that was the case, he would have a huge responsibility to play in the destruction. Zhongxian's face turned crimson red, and he had no idea how he could explain this matter to Elder Feng at all. But at this moment, Elder Feng shook his head bitterly and patted Zhongxian's shoulder consolingly. "Zhongshe, you need no blame yourself for this matter. This has nothing to do with you. Our Shrine of Seers probably got complacent and slacked off in maintaining the defensive barriers, thus resulting in the current circumstances. I know that it might seem that our occupation might seem quite dangerous after everything that has happened, but I can assure you that this is an anomaly. As long as one were to speak prudently and make proper preparations beforehand, one wouldn't face with any danger at all, not to mention that you possess the discarnate constitution of divination. Safe." Seeing that Elder Feng didn't blame him for the matter, Zhongxian internally heaved a sigh of relief. There was no way he could mention the Library of Heaven's Path before the other party. Since the other party didn't realize a thing, it would be foolish for him to speak up and give himself away. As for the damage he had caused, he would just have to find another way to compensate them. Indeed, this is just a freak accident. Usually, it wouldn't even happen once in 10,000 years. Fearing that the genius he had set his eyes on would back out due to this matter, Elder Feng hurriedly explained. "If you are still feeling a little skeptical about the matter, you can take a look at our library over there. We maintain another layer of defensive barrier around it, so it was able to avoid the retribution of the heavens. As such, despite the collapse of the Shrine of Seers, it's still able to remain standing. As long as sufficient defensive measures are made in advance, it's really extremely safe." As he spoke, he gestured over in a direction. Looking at where Elder Feng was pointing at, Zhongxian saw a building standing not too far away. It was connected directly to the Shrine of Seers, but the destruction of the Shrine of Seers didn't seem to have fazed it in the least. Through its open entrance, he could see shelves and shelves of books stacked neatly within. Despite the cloud of dust drifting in the area, the interiors of the library remained perfectly clean. "That's your library?" Zhongxian asked as his eyes lit up. The destruction of the Shrine of Seers had already left him a little panicked, causing him to rack his brain desperately to find a way for him to compensate them. However, if he could access the library and compile a complete Heaven's Path divination art, he would be able to make it up to them in full. "That's right." Elder Feng nodded with a hint of pride in his voice. "Even though the members of our Shrine of Seers branch number much less than the other occupations in the Sanctum of Sages, our collection of books doesn't pale in comparison at all. Sage Shi's tortoiseshell might have been destroyed due to the little accident we had previously, but you can still assess your talent through browsing through the book. Previously, when the other party said that he wanted to browse through the books to determine whether he was suited for the occupation or not, he proposed using Sage Shi's tortoiseshell instead only because he thought that it would be too troublesome and too long. But with the destruction of Sage Shi's tortoiseshell, there was no other way around it anymore. They could only rely on the most primitive method now. "All right then, I'll go take a look." Hearing that he was free to browse through the books, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. He instinctively began walking over to the library when warning bells suddenly rang inside his head, and he quickly halted in his footsteps. "If I were to use to the Library of Heaven's Path in there, would the library collapse as well?" Zhongxian's heart jolted in trepidation. But thinking again, the reason why the Shrine of Seers collapsed was probably because the will of the heavens sensed someone attempting to peer into its secrets, so perhaps it might not work on books. Besides, it wasn't certain that the collapse of the Shrine of Seers was due to him using the Library of Heaven's Path either. Nevertheless, just to be safe, Zhongxian decided to activate his Library of Heaven's Path from where he stood so that even if his guess was wrong, the defensive barrier would still be able to defend the library. Thus, he muttered lightly in his mind, "Floors. Hong Long." In the next moment, a wild inferno swept across the books, burning them down into ashes in an instant. Following which, a massive crack crept across the entire library, similar to what that had happened to the tortoiseshell previously. And in just a few breaths, the building collapsed into a pile of rubble. "My library." Elder Feng's eyes widened to their brim, and a mouthful of fresh blood spurted from his mouth. Frenzy consumed his mind. Just what in the world was happening? Why would multiple calamities strike the Shrine of Seers in such short succession? If it was just once, it could still be reasoned as them failing to conceal their presence well, resulting in the notice of the will of the heavens. However, For it to happen thrice at this point, even he was unable to find any reason to justify it anymore. On the other hand, Zhong Xian's lips twitched in horror at that sight as well. Even books aren't spared either. He wasn't too certain before, but this around, watching with his own eyes the inferno spreading across the library, there was no way for him to deny it anymore. He quickly turned to look at the dazed elder beside him and called out, "Elder Feng! Elder Feng! Elder Feng!" Zhong Xian called out thrice, but the other party didn't respond at all. Alarmed by the unnatural state that Elder Feng was in, he began worrying whether the other party had ended up sustained grievous internal injuries due to the multiple shocks he had suffered, so he immediately walked toward the other party to take a closer look. But in the next moment, a thick streak of lightning suddenly appeared from nowhere and fell right on top of Elder Feng. Catcher! Elder Feng collapsed to the ground. "Elder Feng, you!" Horrified, Zhong Xian hastened his footsteps. Hong long! Hong long! Hong long! Hong long! Multiple streaks of lightning drowned the old man, leaving only a pair of spasming legs outside. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.